Okay.
Um, so on Zoom, first of all, if if you want to set up your own groups
Hmm.
using Zoom, it only gives you like 45 minutes
Okay.
unless you have the premium one, which I do,
Hmm.
so it's unlimited.
Oh, okay.
But you can use Google Meet. Um, and there's another one that we figured out too. So if you wanted to do your own group and you don't have
Hmm.
Zoom, Google Meet works
Okay.
just as fine. Discord works. We did it with
Okay. Oh
Discord
yeah, I
once.
have that. Okay.
Um, but through all the, I guess, different iterations of us doing the exegetical reading
Hmm.
groups, Zoom does seem to be kind of the just the easiest, most reliable.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
I'll probably just get the premium depending how much it is. Like,
yeah. And then recording and all that, like pretty straightforward, pretty simple.
oh, okay.
Um, I'm going to where where it is. So I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share.
Okay. Which version did you want to use today for it? Like the Robinson or the Stambau? Because I think he put the Stambau one on the syllabus. I'm not sure.
I've got the Macquarie one, whatever the one
Okay.
that we've been
Okay,
reading.
yeah. I guess maybe
Uh,
we'll use that one because that's just what Dave is running with.
I do I do think I like this one better
Hmm.
than the Stambaugh. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just started reading this version this morning, and I was just kind of like going back and looking
Hmm.
at it, but I think I like this version better.
Hmm.
Um, and I
I've
that's the one that everyone else is going to be familiar with.
I've only seen like or two commentaries that use the Stambau.
Yeah,
And it's like it's the people who aren't in the Dreyfus camp I've noticed too. So I was just like, I've been in the Dreyfus like lens for so long. I'm like, maybe I'll see what these other guys are saying at some point. But like, I'm already kind of biased towards this one.
yeah, I that's interesting. I wonder if it's because that's just the book that everyone like it was in initially introduced to it to, and so you just have that affinity
Exactly.
for it. That might be it.
I
But
think so.
also, um, I like the writing in this version better. The
Hmm.
This version seems more careful, whereas
Okay.
the Stombaugh version to me kind of seems a little more flowery and literary, which is fine.
Oh, okay.
Also,
Yeah.
I don't want that when I'm like trying to
No, yeah, no,
super,
that makes sense. It's good to like sell books, but it's not good when you're trying to like unpack like
yeah,
discourse.
yeah.
No, I get that.
So, chapter, I was thinking if we just start at the beginning of chapter 4 and go through
Oh.
it. Um, I almost was thinking, well, let's go back to section 25
Hmm.
or 24, but no, I don't think we
Okay.
should do that.
Okay.
If we if we go do chapter 4, hopefully it can contribute to the conversation.
Hmm.
And if anybody hasn't read it and reread it, they can watch the
Hmm.
video.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Um, if they want to chime in on uh, on our comments and shit like that. Um, so we'll kind of keep it. Hopefully, we can match the pace of the course. And
Okay.
we with like with the or they know not what they do course, we were just like banging them out. We had several groups doing readings, and so
Hmm.
one group would hit the first part of a chapter, one group would hit the middle part, one
Oh,
group would
okay,
hit
that's
the
cool.
so it was really cool. We had a playlist going where you
Okay,
could pretty much get the whole text in exegetical reading form on the forums, and it was cool.
that's cool.
Um, so yeah, hopefully we can get a lot more of these sessions in because they're a
Hmm.
good resource. They're a really good
Oh
resource
yeah,
to
no,
have.
absolutely. And I figure we're still like in the first division and early enough, so to get that ball rolling.
Yeah. So can you see the
I can. I have it pulled up on
okay,
my
that's perfect.
Kindle and on like the app, and it's the same. It's pretty much the same thing.
All right. So without further ado, we'll get into it. I'll
Okay.
go ahead and I'll start off. If you have any
Okay.
interjections, just pipe up and then
Okay.
we will bounce back and forth and kind of
Okay.
go.
Sounds good.
Um, we try to keep it to 70-30, but we never succeed in that. We always fail.
Oh yeah.
So don't yeah, whenever there's an interjection, pipe
Okay.
up and all right.
Sounds good, man.
Chapter 4, being in the world as being with and being oneself, the they. Our analysis of the worldhood of the world has constantly been bringing the whole phenomenon of being in the world into view, although its constitutive items have not all stood out with the same phenomenal distinctness as the phenomenon of the world itself. We have interpreted the world ontologically by going through what is ready to hand within the world, and this interpretation has been put first, because dasein and its everydayness, with regard to which dasein remains a constant theme for study, not only is in a world, but comports itself toward that world with one predominant kind of being. Approximately and for the most part, dasein is fascinated with its world. Dasein is thus absorbed in the world, the kind of being which it thus possesses, and in general, the being in which underlies it, are essential in determining the character of a phenomenon which we are now about to study. We shall approach this phenomenon by asking who it is that Dasein is in its everydayness. All the structures of being which belong to Dasein, together with the phenomenon which provides the answer to this question of the who, are ways of its being. To characterize these ontologically is to do so existentially. We must therefore pose the question correctly and outline the procedure for bringing into view a broader phenomenal domain of Dasein's everydayness. By directing our researches toward the phenomenon which is to provide us with an answer to the question of the who, we shall be led to certain structures of Dasein which are equiprimordial with being in the world. Being with and Dasein with in this kind of being is grounded the mode of everyday being oneself. The explication of this mode will enable us to see what we may call the subject of everydayness, the they. Our chapter on the who of the average Dasein will thus be divided up as follows. 1. An approach to the existential question of the who of Dasein. And 2. The Dasein with of others, and everyday being with, and everyday being with. And 3. Everyday being oneself and the they. There's a footnote. Where was that? Oh, okay. So that was just the they, Das Man.
Hmm.
Um, all right. So section 25, an approach to the existential question of the who of Dasein. The answer to the question of who Dasein is one that was seemingly given in section 9, where we indicated formally the basic characteristics of Dasein. Dasein is an entity which is in each case I, myself. Its being is in each case mine. This definition indicates an ontologically constitutive state, but it does no more than indicate it. At the same time, this tells us ontically, though in a rough and ready fashion, that in each case, an I, not others, is this entity. The question of the who answers itself in terms of the I, itself, the subject, the self. The who is what maintains itself as something identical throughout changes in its experiences and ways of behavior, and which relates itself to this changing multiplicity in so doing. Ontologically, we understand it as something which is in each case already constantly present at hand, both in and for a closed realm, and which lies at the basis, in a very special sense, as the subjectum. As something self-same in manifold otherness, it has the character of the self, even if one rejects the sole substance and the thinghood of consciousness, or denies that a person is an object. Ontologically, one is still positing something whose being retains the meaning of present at hand, whether it does so explicitly or not. Substantiality is the ontological clue for determining which entity is to provide the answer to the question of the who. Dasein is tacitly conceived in advance as something present at hand. This meaning of being is always implicated in any case where the being of Dasein has been left indefinite. Yet presence at hand is the kind of being which belongs to entities whose character is not that of Dasein. That, I think,
Mm.
is where a lot of people not gonna do that. That is where I think I've gone wrong in the past with Heidegger.
What's that?
Um, it doesn't like it's not like he's making moral judgments or value judgments on that. He really is just trying to describe like this is us.
Hmm.
Like like as a being, this is how we differentiate the I from the rest of the world, and this is how you kind of situate yourself in the world. I think in the past, um, I've kind of got confused and thought he was making some type of like value judgment that like there are people in the world who are just stupid, brain off
Hmm.
idiots, and then there are these people who are careful and they pay attention and they're aware. And that's kind of like a meme that goes around a lot now with like smooth brain, big brain shit, like on the
Hmm.
internet.
Oh yeah.
Um, And I think that's gross. Like, I don't ever want to project onto someone and be like, well, they're just a smooth brain idiot. Like,
Hmm.
um, I mean, I do that shit, but it's not cool.
Yeah.
It's gross, and I don't want to do that shit.
No same.
There, like, there are times when I'm too caught up in something I've got going on, my own involvement, where I'm not aware of how what I'm doing affects others.
Mm.
Or like I'm not aware of the conditions and the prerequisites for whatever it is that I'm doing. Um, and yeah, I think making the distinction between like a description and like a
Hmm.
value judgment is worth doing.
Hmm. Kind of like that detached, like not necessarily like objective, but just in that like kind of like, okay, this is just what I notice about how like Dasein is, as opposed to like these guys are idiots and you got to be like me, like the philosopher, whomever. Yeah, yeah. No, definitely.
Yeah.
And
Which
I think
is
what, sorry, go ahead.
it's funny because Heidegger is definitely a dickhead and he's
Oh yeah,
definitely an asshole, but he's not being a dickhead right here,
yeah,
right now.
no, no, he'll say it. I think like a lot of philosophers too, like are like that because it's like sitting back and like writing all this shit. You're gonna get like a big brain head and like I feel like a lot of people like when I got a philosophy degree when I was like in my 20s, early 20s, like all the kids were like the shy or like just learning how to like get into this and they couldn't talk to like any of the like normies in the class and they like had this like I'm so smart because I understand Descartes or whatever, but it's like you don't know how to have a conversation with like someone else. So like how smart are you like functionally? So
Yeah.
it's easy to just make value judgments, but it's like when you're doing it, you're kind of being an asshole and
Yeah.
not acknowledging your own like ignorance and other capacities. I feel like,
Yeah.
but no, I agree. I didn't really have anything like highlighted in this portion, really. I still like when I'm reading him, I still feel like there's a little bit of Kierkegaard coming out because he just talks about like a lot of relations and like different aspects, and I just have like the sickness unto death like stuck in my head from like that one paragraph where it's like the self is relation which relates to itself, and I just feel like that like is hated in being in time throughout. Been noticing, so I'm trying
Yeah.
not to like project it.
That I mean that is in I think section 22, 23, 24. That's there. He's
Hmm.
talking about like signs and
Oh yeah.
indications. Um that's yeah, that's definitely there.
Hmm.
Huh.
And then the last thing I just want to add is I feel like still he's doing that whole like I notice he'll just like throw jabs and then like wait like 2, 3 pages to unpack it or like and I guess reading like biographies about him was bad in a sense because I know he used to like force breakdowns on people for fun and like kind of torment people and I just feel like he's like fucking with us in the book too a little bit. So I'm like, is this Heidegger what he actually believes, or is this him like prepping me for like the fake and like a boxer? So there's a lot
Yeah.
going on at once.
Yeah. Yeah. Forcing breakdowns. I
Another thing that Dave's big on.
Yeah. I made the mistake of reading um Heidegger in Ruins right before
Oh
this.
shit.
And I mean, eh, I actually think it added more to the experience because I am being
Okay.
more careful in my reading
Hmm.
and being more deliberate. But yeah, like removing myself from the, presuppositions and not trying to project anything onto just this.
Hmm.
Um I think that's a good place to be in is to be hyper aware of, oh, I'm projecting that. That's not actually in the text. I'm
Hmm.
putting it in there.
Exactly.
All right. The assertion that it is I who in each case dasein is ontically obvious. But this must not mislead us into supposing that the route for an ontological interpretation of what is given in this way has thus been unmistakably prescribed. Indeed, it remains questionable whether even the mere ontical content of the above assertion does not or does proper justice to the stock of phenomena belonging to everyday Dasein. It could be that the who of everyday Dasein just is not the I myself. If, in arriving at ontico-ontological assertions, one is to exhibit the phenomena in terms of the kind of being which the entities themselves possesses, and if this way of exhibiting them is to retain its priority over even the most usual and obvious of answers, and over whatever ways of formulating problems may have been derived from those answers, then the phenomenological interpretation of Dasein must be defended against a perversion of our problematic when we come to the question we are about to formulate. So I think here he's just doing more like preparation, like, hey,
Yeah.
remember, be careful, pay attention.
Hmm.
Um, I think.
No, I think so. He's just doing that like setup.
But is it not contrary to the rules of all sound method to approach a problematic without sticking to what is given as evident in the area of our theme? And what is more indubitable than the givenness of the I? And does not this givenness tell us that if we aim to work this out primordially, we must disregard everything else that is given, not only a world that is, but even the being of other eyes? The kind of giving we have here is the mere formal reflective awareness of the I. And perhaps what it gives is indeed evident. This insight even affords access to a phenomenological problematic in its own right, which has in principle the signification of providing a framework as a formal phenomenology of consciousness. In this context of an existential analytic of factical Dasein, the question arises whether giving the I in the way we have mentioned discloses Dasein in its everydayness. If it discloses Dasein at all, is it then obvious a priori that access to Dasein must be gained only by mere reflective awareness of the I of action? What if this kind of giving itself on the part of Dasein should lead our existential analytic astray and do so, indeed, in a manner grounded in the being of Dasein itself? Perhaps when Dasein addresses itself in the way which is closest to itself, it always says, I am this entity. And in the long run says this loudest when it is not this entity. Dasein is in each case mine, and this is its constitution. But what if this should be the very reason why, proximately and for the most part, Dasein is not itself? What if the aforementioned approach, starting with the givenness of the I to Dasein itself, and with a rather patent self interpretation of Dasein, should lead to the existential analytic, as it were, into a pitfall? If that which is accessible by mere giving can be determined, there's presumably an ontological horizon for determining it. But what if this horizon should remain in principle undetermined? It may well be that it is always ontically correct to say of this entity that I am it. Yet the ontological analytic, which makes use of such assertions, would make certain reservations about them in principle. The word I is to be understood only in the sense of a non-committal formal indicator, indicating something which may perhaps reveal itself as its opposite in some particular phenomenal context of being. In that case, the not I is by no means tantamount to an entity which essentially lacks I-hood, but is rather a definite kind of being which the I itself possesses, such as having lost itself. That's fucky. And it seems to me, it seems to me like a roundabout way
Hmm.
of saying um you're only you in context to the world around you. Like that's kind of what
Hmm.
I get out of it.
Oh, I think that makes sense because it's like goes back to the whole like because he's setting up for like the being with and like you talked about being in the world. And I just feel like it's his way of saying like we're not just like the Descartes like detached like minds, but it's like I'm a student. I'm like we're veterans. Like we're in that context. And I think he's just kind of trying to say that like you can either win or lose yourself, like because it is what you do. And like Dazan is in each case mine, and this is in its constitution. And it's like Dasein is not itself could just mean in the sense that it's like you're not owning your action or you're just like because even if you're like fuck society, I'm gonna drop out, like he kind of says later, you're still doing that in context. Like you saw the movie Into the Wild or Red Thoreau, so you're like, okay, I can do this. So that's kind of how I just my like X-Men comic book version of this is just a quick
Yeah.
clip.
Yeah.
But
For which is in order to's,
mhm,
you can't escape it. Um, and and don't put your cart before your horse, or
mhm,
don't put yourself
mhm,
outside of the world, because you're not. And if you
mhm.
think you are, then that's when you're fucking up.
Yeah, and I think that's his biggest like disdain with philosophy for like the past 2,500 years, because it's like Kant and everybody still is like just doing the rational detached mind, and it's like you're in your armchair doing it, and it's like you're in the world and you're not acknowledging that, or like science. So I just feel like he's like presenting it in a bunch of different ways to just keep reminding us, because it's like that's been the status quo for so long. He's like putting like the person, like the existential aspect into it, like the choices and all that. And most philosophy, like the analytics, are like that has nothing to do with anything, but it's like no, it does though.
Yeah.
So, also, let me know when you want me to take over reading.
All right. We'll do we'll
I
do a
think
little bit more.
okay. I think we were at the yet even a positive interpretation. I could be wrong.
Yet even the positive interpretation of dot sign, which we have so far given, already forbids us to start with the formal givenness of the I, if our purpose is to answer the question of the who in a way which is phenomenally adequate. In clarifying being in the world, we have shown that a bare subject without a world never is proximally, nor is it ever given. And so, in the end, an isolated I without others is just as far from being proximally given. If, however, the others already are there with us in being in the world, And if this is ascertained phenomenally, even this should not mislead us into supposing that the ontological structure of what is thus given is obvious, requiring no investigation. Our task is to make visible phenomenally the species to which this dasein with, in closest everydayness, belongs, and to interpret it in a way which is ontologically appropriate.
I think I had that underlined because it's like I feel like when he's literally telling you what he's doing, and it's like we're disregarding what is like closest to us, and we need to interpret it like ontologically and like see how like our being is right in front of us, but we're like tripping on it as we're trying to like do philosophy.
Yeah, yeah, like it's like I had a cool metaphor all primed and
Mhm.
ready to go and it just disappeared.
Oh
So
shit, I'm sorry.
um but yeah, it's like we're discounting the dependence,
Hmm.
the interdependence, uh, for this illusion of I-ness or
Hmm.
selfhood, which I like that a lot.
Yeah, no,
Like
definitely.
that's legit.
And it's interesting too because I feel like a lot of philosophers are like outsiders in the sense that it's like how many people like on a Wednesday morning or whatever to whatever today is to are sitting there like reading Being in Time and like discussing. So it's like he's like putting us back in the world. Like he says, and so in the end, an isolated I without others is just as far from being proximally given. Like it doesn't exist. There is no isolated I, even though that's what like Berkeley and everybody else, Descartes are like postulating. It's like, no, like it's still not though. Like you're still in discourse, you're still in like caught up. I have like a Wittgensteinian, like I don't know if it's because of Dreyfus, but it's like I keep thinking about how like we're all caught in the same language games, we're all socialized, like so.
Yeah, I like the idea. I was calling it a Schrodinger's individualism.
Oh, that's
Um,
good.
and it's like this myth. And it's funny to me that a lot of the people um on the right who take Heidegger um for all that he is, and they love the fact that he's a Nazi.
Hmm.
They also like love this idea of the individual, rugged individualism.
Hmm.
And it's funny because like Heidegger's like, no, dude, like we're not individuals. Like in
Hmm.
fact, like the individual is made up of, you know, millions of individuals. Like
Hmm.
and like there is no individual. And I like that a lot. Systems theory and like all this other shit. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, like the myth of the individual um is at the root cause of so many horrible things. You look at people's material conditions and
Oh
they
yeah.
justify horrible shit because they think like, well, I have bootstraps and I pulled myself up and I'm this and I'm that. And it's like that solipsistic point of view.
Hmm.
Um, it's just it's funny to me that it is so ingrained in like reactionary politics.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, Heidegger's over here doing this, but yet
Hmm.
he's still hyper reactionary. Like it's a weird point of tension, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's almost like cognitive dissonance and like Heidegger himself, I feel like, honestly,
Yeah,
because it's
he would
like
be
he's
so mad.
exactly, exactly. And like I can't help but like I hate talking about like politics, but like the whole submarine thing. So it's like you have this ship of immigrants that like the captain's getting in trouble for because it's like, oh, those people are just untouchables. Who gives a fuck? But it's like, oh, the billionaires pay, but it's like, who's paying the Coast Guard to get them? And it's like now they're
Why
not
is the
individuals
coast
anymore. Yeah.
yeah,
So it's just
exactly
like
that.
fucking
Yeah,
it's just putting on whatever what the individual lens when they like talk about how great they are, but it's like, oh fuck, we need help. But
yeah,
when it's like 700 people who need help, it's like, no, 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 they're pieces of shit. Like, don't help them. They haven't got themselves, and it's like you wanted the fucking submarine with a joystick. Like, fuck you.
dude,
Like,
dude. and it yeah, it's funny, and it really does come down to the meme. We live in a society. It really
Hmm.
does come down to who's going to build the roads. Like
Yeah.
those memes are like,
Yeah.
they touch on something real, and
Oh
the
yeah.
fact that like every single one of us is so interdependent. Like it's impossible to extricate. Well,
Hmm.
and there's the material side of it, but there's also this self psychological phenomena, like the shit Heidegger's talking about. It's
Hmm.
also dependent on the world around you.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really, really awesome.
Hmm.
And I also think like that's where a lot of the hippy dippy people that like Heidegger kind of get, like back in the
Hmm.
day, my initial understanding or misunderstanding of Heidegger was like, oh, so it's like the Force, but without all the silly sci-fi shit. But it
Hmm.
really is kind of like the Force, like
Hmm.
this
No, yeah.
this something that flows between and interconnects and
Hmm.
sustains and
Everybody
um
feels it, but at the same
yeah.
time, they're not like tuned in. No, no, no. That makes sense.
All right. We do this one? No,
That's the
okay,
one
here
we're
we are.
on. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just as the
All right.
ontical obviousness.
You want to take it away?
Sure. Just as the ontical obviousness of the being in itself of entities within the world misleads us into the conviction that the meaning of this being is obvious ontologically and makes us overlook the phenomenon of the world. The optical obviousness of the fact that dasein is in each case mine also hides the possibility that the ontological problematic which belongs to it has been led astray. Approximately the who of dasein is not only a problem ontologically, even ontically it remains concealed. I underline that part too because it's like we don't even realize that it's like hidden like in us, like in our own existence, as well as like us as Dazan, like all of us. So it's just like we're just tripped up like as us, as like you and me, and then just all of us. And I think he's just like hammering that point home. But I just thought that was a good like
Yeah.
a juicy quote, if you will.
I so I wonder, like Geist.
Hmm.
Like this is Geist. And I think Geist is like, I mean, yeah, you can't really deny it, you can't really argue it, because it kind of just is a thing that we all kind of recognize in a way.
Hmm.
Or at least I think so. Um
Hmm.
yeah. Well, and I mean that can obviously be used politically
Hmm.
to get people into extreme um positions and stuff. But
And he's
I
an example of that if you think about it, which is ironic.
yeah. Um but yeah, man, like I do think that idea uh could be used to do a lot of really good things. Well, because it would help to kind of break down people's
Hmm.
um faulty versions of whatever individualism that they kind of hold to. And
Hmm.
you can't really get outside that without really truly kind of examining it. And I think that's
Hmm.
kind of like, yeah, like he's starting over again and giving multiple examples of like,
Hmm.
this is the thing that you need to critically examine. Like it,
Hmm.
and it's prior to all this other stuff. Like it's prior to identity categories and all this stuff. Like
Exactly.
it's this first ontical separation and not atomization, but like
Hmm.
yeah, like this idea that I am, all of me is contained within me.
Yeah.
Um, and I am only and exactly what is contained within this idea of me, when in reality, it's the opposite. Everything that I think of as me is reliant on everything outside of me.
And I think too, like I'm thinking about like Hume, like I'm a bundle of perceptions, and it's like, no, you're more than that. Like you know what perception is, and what you're perceiving is caught up in the beings in the world, like because you know about them and how it is to comport yourself, and you know the in order to use and for the sake of which is. So it's like he's like shitting on Kant, Descartes, Hume, even without realizing it, and it's like it's staring you right in the fucking face. He's saying, and it's like you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like it's just crazy though, because like even when I was like reading Kant or other shit, like I wasn't thinking about phenomenology or any of that, because it's like you just take it as like so ingrained. And again, I think that's why he's like trying to like almost like Zen. It's like he's trying to like just break you down until you come to the answer yourself. And I think that's why some people don't like Heidegger, because like you're saying, like he's throwing Geist in there, he's throwing other stuff. I'm seeing like the metaphysics of quality, and some of that shit's like too out there for people. But it's like he's showing you it's there, but because you can't like examine it and hold it, it's not real
Yeah.
to you. But it's like, but it
Hmm.
is. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's trippy. All right. I think I was at, but does this mean?
Mhm.
But does this mean that there are no clues whatever for answering the questions of the who by ways of existential analysis? Certainly not. Of the ways in which we formally indicated the constitution of Dasein's being in sections 9 and 12 above, the one we have been discussing does not, of course, function so well as such a clue as does the one according to which Dasein's essence is grounded in its existence. If the I is an existential characteristic of Dasein, then it is one which must be interpreted existentio. In the case, the who is to be answered only by exhibiting phenomenally a definite kind of being which Dasein possesses. If in each case Dasein is itself only an existing, then the constancy of the self, no less than the possibility of its failure to stand by itself, requires that we formulate the question existentially and ontologically as the sole appropriate way of access to its problematic. But if the self is conceived only as a way of being of this entity, this seems tantamount to volatilizing the real core of Dasein. Any apprehensiveness, however, which one may have about this gets its nourishment from the perverse assumption that the entity in question has at bottom the kind of being which belongs to something present at hand, even if one is far from attributing to it the solidity of an occurrent corporeal thing. Yet man's substance is not spirit as a synthesis of soul and body, it is rather existence.
Ooh, that's a pretty
Yeah.
big.
Oh, yeah. It's a banger, as the kids say.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, it is more of the same, but that
Mhm.
final,
Oh, yeah.
that's yeah, he's on fire. He's heating up.
Oh yeah, yeah. I had that like um highlighted from the but of the self ending with existence because that just goes back to what we were saying like before. Like we're just not our like present at hand qualities that you could examine. It's like our existence and what we do in our existence that is our like. I think that's too what Sartre was like reading when he said his whole like uh existence precedes essence.
Yeah.
So, and then after that, I guess he got tripped up on Heidegger. But yeah, this is more of the same, is what I would say. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay,
Um, I am no, yeah.
okay, all right. 26. The Dasein with of others and everyday being with. The answer to the question of the who of everyday Dasein is to be obtained by analyzing that kind of being in which Dasein maintains itself proximally and for the most part. Our investigation takes its orientation from being in the world, the basic state of Dasein by which every mode of its being gets co-determined. If we are correct in saying that by the foregoing explication of the world, the remaining structural items of being in the world have become visible, then this must also have prepared us in a way for answering the question of the who. In our description of that environment, which is closest to us, the work world of the craftsman, for example, the outcome was that, along with the equipment to be found when one is at work, those others for whom the work is destined are encountered too. If this is ready to hand, then there lies in the kind of being which belongs to it, that is, in its involvement, an essential assignment or reference to possible wearers, for instance, for whom it should be cut to the figure. Similarly, when material is put to use, we encounter its producer or supplier as the one who serves well or badly. When, for example, we walk along the edge of a field, but outside it, the field shows itself as belonging to such and such a person and decently kept up by him. The book we have used was bought at so and so shop and given by such and such a person, and so forth. The boat anchored at the shore is assigned in its being in itself to an acquaintance who undertakes voyages with it, but even if it is a boat which is strange to us, it is still indicative of others. The others who are thus encountered in a ready to hand environmental context of equipment are not somehow added on in thought to something which is proximately just present at hand. Such things are encountered from out of the world in which they are ready to hand for others. A world which is always mind to in advance in our previous analysis. The range of what is encountered within the world was, in the first instance, narrowed down to equipment ready to hand or nature present at hand, and thus to entities with a character other than that of dasein. This restriction was necessary not only for the purpose of simplifying our explication, but above all because the kind of being which belongs to the dasein of others, as we encounter it within the world, differs from readiness to hand and presence at hand. Thus, Dazon's world frees entities, which not only are quite distinct from equipment and things, but which also, in accordance with their kind of being as Dazon themselves are in the world, in which they are at the same time encountered within the world and are in it by way of being in the world. These entities are neither present at hand nor ready to hand. On the contrary, they are like the very dasein which frees them, in that they are there too and they're with it. So if one should want to identify the world in general with entities within the world, one would have to say that dasein too is world. Thus, in characterizing the encountering of others, one is again still oriented by that dasein, which is in each case one's own. But even if in this characterization, does one not start by marking out and isolating the I so that one must then seek some way of getting over to the others from this isolated subject? To avoid this misunderstanding, we must notice in what sense we are talking about the others. By others, we do not mean everyone else but me, those over against whom the I stands out. They are rather those from whom, for the most part, one does not distinguish oneself, those among whom one is too. This being there too, with them, does not have the ontological character of a being present at hand along with them within a world. This with is something of the character of dasein. The two means the sameness of being as circumspectively concernful being in the world. With and to are to be understood existentially, not categorically. By reason of this, with like being in the world is always the one that I share with others. The world of dasein is a with world. Being in is being with others. Their being in themselves within the world is dasein with. Did you want me to keep going or did you want to talk?
So I think I like this part.
Mm-hmm.
I think basically he's saying um when things are freed um
Mm-hmm.
to engage in their involvements, fulfill their whatever,
Hmm.
then they are freed into being dasein. And when you do that, um, you kind of allow yourself to also be with them, to be
Hmm.
dasein alongside them.
Yeah.
And I think that's like recognizing, oh, these people that are going all about their lives, they're not here for me. They're here
Hmm.
for their lives, their involvements, and I'm here for mine. And we're participating in the world together at the same time.
I think too, like, you know how like people like there's like a trend on social media where it's like I'm the main character and
Mhm.
like people say that and all these other people are NPCs. It's like Heidegger's like, no, everybody's the main character for their own world. And like you could be an NPC and not realize it. Like
Right.
that's kind of my cookie cutter like reading of it.
Yeah, for
And it's
sure.
like there are no main characters because it's like we're all in it, you know? And it's like you're not separate. There is no main character without like everybody else.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Collectively,
Mhm.
we constitute a main character.
Yeah.
Um, and again, that can be awesome. It can also be put to
Hmm.
nefarious ends.
Hmm.
But if you take that and you also kind of update it, um, and you take a critical look at like identity categories and social categories and shit like
Hmm.
that, I think that can be a very useful way to just get you to realize like, oh, we're all in the same boat and we're
Hmm.
all working towards an end. You know, we all have our own shit going on and you should be cool. You shouldn't be a dickhead.
Hmm. Pretty
But
much, yeah.
it's so fucked up that Heidegger's
The
like,
complete
yeah, I love the
opposite.
Nazis,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I was gonna say.
what the fuck?
I don't know if like maybe like not my defense of him, but I feel like he just got caught up in like the like philosopher king mindset, like edge lord almost. Like everybody like sucks but me, so I'll sort it out. And like maybe like this Hitler guy will like give him the myth of battles and we'll create like a utopia and then everybody will be happy. And it's like no, 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 no.
Yeah, I think like
I'm not defending him. I'm just saying like maybe that's where
no, that's I mean that's
they.
part of his situatedness. Like it is important to like look back and realize
Mm,
he didn't critically examine
hmm.
you know his own conditions. He
Yeah.
didn't. And that's what led him to make these decisions. Um and it is kind of funny. It's like, oh, you know, you slipped on the same banana peel that we're all slipping
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But it also it is true. Like that was just the cultural milieu of his time was
Hmm.
like, yeah, fancy boys who don't have to work and who get to think and read all day.
Hmm.
Um, they are better in this way. And
Hmm.
yeah, like but it just sucks because he is doing this wonderful, like demonstrating
Hmm.
this wonderful method of like avoiding these traps,
Hmm.
but he fails to do so himself.
Oh yeah, and I think it goes back to like that happens to a lot of people. Like Christian Birdie was supposed to be like this religious leader and all this, and he was banging like underage chicks and stuff. And it's like Gandhi, and it's like everybody's got these. I think these guys too think because they're like doing such good work with this, they rationalize where it's like, oh, it's okay if I slip because like I'm preventing other people from slipping. Because it's like he was like my age, like 35, like seducing Hannah Red when she was like 18 and like sending
Yeah.
her letters and stuff. So, or like Chomsky, like, hey, what were those checks to Epstein? And it's like, oh, let's talk about linguistics. Like,
Yeah.
so,
The Chomsky thing,
yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
wish I wish Michael Parenti would have got more famous,
yeah.
but Chomsky was the one that everybody liked. And I do think it's because he
Hmm.
was useful to the state and the organs of power.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah, it is what it is. I almost named one of my sons after Noam Chomsky.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And my
That
and
would
this
be
was
funny. That's hilarious.
yeah, I think 15 years ago now. And my
Oh,
wife was like, no, we're not naming our son Gnome. But like
that's
back then,
hilarious.
I
Yeah,
was like, yeah.
you'd be like, it's no Noman Mailer. That's what I meant. But yeah, no, that's hilarious. I saw the meme where it was like Foucault won the debate. Like, cause
He did.
back
He
then,
already
yeah, yeah.
he did.
But no, that's true. I want to take a bathroom break real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah,
Thank
that's a
you.
good idea. Me too.
I can keep reading if you want. I don't mind.
All right.
119, I think we were at. When others are encountered, it is not the case that one's own subject is proximately present at hand, and that the rest of the subjects, which are likewise occurrents, get discriminated beforehand and then apprehended, nor are they encountered by a primary act of looking at oneself in such a way that the opposite pole of a distinction first gets ascertained. They are encountered from out of the world in which concernfully circumspective dasein essentially dwells. Theoretically concocted explanations of the being present at hand of others urge themselves upon us all too easily. But over against such explanations, we must hold fast to the phenomenal facts of the case, which we have pointed out, namely that others are encountered environmentally. This elemental worldly kind of encountering, which belongs to Dasein and is closest to it, goes so far that even one's own Dasein becomes something that it can itself proximally come across, only when it looks away from experiences and the center of its actions, or does not as yet see them at all. Dasein finds itself proximally in what it does, uses, expects, avoids, and those things environmentally ready to hand, which is proximately concerned. And even when Dasein explicitly addresses itself as I here, this locative personal designation must be understood in time in terms of Dasein's existential spatiality. In interpreting this, see section 23, we have already intimated that this I here does not mean a certain privilege point, that of an I thing, but has to be understood as being in terms of the yonder of the world that is ready to hand, the yonder which is the dwelling place of Dasein as concern. And again, I think that's just again another way of saying the same thing. It's our concern and what we do and like what we're avoiding, what we're expecting, like that's what sticks out to us in the environment. Like the walking in the hallway, we're thinking about like I need to go get gas or I need to go eat lunch and make a ham sandwich. And it's like that's what we're really encountering, not the hallway itself and other stuff. So
Yeah.
just that the world is concerned and what's significant. I think he really is. I think he's just really trying to hammer that in.
Yeah.
That's all I had with that, really.
Yeah. I was gonna, I guess, bring up the concern. Was it concern is a precondition of care, but
Mm-hmm.
then it has like a weird dialectical relationship. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think we need to go into that. But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it is ultimately um, being toward the world. Like,
Hmm.
um, you're not a passive, uh, you know, spectator. Like you,
Hmm.
you are in the world. You're alongside the world. You're with the world. Like everything from your point of view only
Hmm.
matters because it matters in the first place.
Exactly. It kind of too, now that I think about it, like, is a rebuttal to nihilism, just in the sense that there may not be like an overarching like religious meaning to the world, or like there already, but it's like you
Yeah,
do care about shit,
I
and it does
think
have meaning.
yeah, I think it I don't know, it may or may not be
Hmm.
kind of like a rebuttal. Heidegger
Hmm.
really did see himself as like um the prophesized thinker through
Hmm.
Nietzsche. So
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
it's definitely post Nietzsche. It's definitely um following on from that. I don't
Hmm.
I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a great way to get out of it.
Hmm.
Um like it doesn't matter if it really matters because it
Yeah,
does matter. Like you can't escape
exactly.
the fact that it already matters.
Hmm.
Like if you want to have cosmological
Hmm.
conversations, metaphysical
Yeah.
conversations, that's fine. But in order for you to have those conversations in the first place, it matters enough for you to care. And since you
Exactly.
already care, like it's irrefutable. So it's
And I,
definitely
mm,
a good escape from nihilism, whether he intended it or not.
mm,
Maybe.
that's true. I took this class in college, and it was called The Meaning of Life, and we had to read like we read everybody's thing. We didn't read Heidegger, but it was like, I think it was AJ Ayer who like had like a student over, and he was like, "Oh, there's no meaning to life," and then he was like, "Well, propositionally, that doesn't matter, so you're fine." And it's like, I think I like Heidegger's answer, even if it's not deliberate, better. Because like
Mhm.
he's kind of saying the same thing, but he's saying the opposite. He's like, no, there's meaning in the fact that it means something to you. Where AJA is like, no, it doesn't mean
Eh,
shit because it's empty.
I
So,
like so when people talk about like the search for meaning, I think
mm,
my go-to has always been like, well, no, we're not searching for meaning. We're discovering meaning. We're making
mm,
meaning. Like
yeah,
all this shit only matters to us in the first place. Um, so like there's no meaning, like you can't go out and get it. Like
mm,
it's already there.
mm,
Like we're making it. And I guess that might go down into like a social constructivist point of view, which
mm,
can get silly.
mm,
But also, um, if you temper that with just a little bit of humility, I think like,
yeah,
yeah, of course, like this only matters because we recognize that it matters.
mm,
So even if like there is a God and he says this matters, that doesn't mean anything to me because the reason I care is because I see it. I recognize that it matters.
mm.
Um, it's yeah, yeah. It is a
No, I agree.
great way to deal with, oh, nothing matters. I'm Schopenhauer. Everything
Exactly.
sad. Like I'm sad too, bitch, but
Yeah,
also
exactly. But it's like it does matter to a point, because
it
even
does.
when I think he talks about later about like anxiety or like dropping out of society, it's like it's still dropping out is still significant to you.
Yeah.
Like despairing is significant to you in a way. So I think he's just like, I don't know. Like the first time I read it, I really was just focusing on the care, but it really stood out to me like this time, and that's why I like reading it more than once, because you get like more to it because you can see later and how it builds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it like Heidegger is just saying like, hey, like just the whole significance thing and care, and it's like we're language beings, we're meaning beings, and it's like that's just we dasein is significance in a way
Yeah.
because we are our world. So
Yeah.
that's I think that's
Yeah.
something I
And
get out of him.
so Dasein is significance
Hmm.
and Dasein is a discoverer.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Uh, um, yeah, so it doesn't matter if someone put it there.
Hmm.
What matters is you're discovering it.
Hmm. No,
Yeah.
definitely. No, I agree.
I like
Yeah.
this part with the Humboldt.
Hmm.
I really want to focus on this part.
Okay.
Not right now, but like
Okay.
uh um I've been thinking about what I'm going to write about
Oh,
this
okay.
part when he talks about like the spatiality and the I
Hmm.
and thou and here and
Okay.
yonder. I like this part a lot, but I
Okay.
don't I don't think
You want to unpack it now? You just want to save it for.
yeah, because I don't think it's fully clicked yet. Like
Okay.
the but I like it. The
Hmm.
um
Well, if something like pops off as we're reading it, and you want to
yeah.
like kind of dance with it, we can if you want. Or if you like are like, hey, I'm gonna hold, because like sometimes like I feel you have to let like Heidegger marinate, like Dave
Yep.
was saying, let you dream Heideggerian. Because it's like I
Yeah.
was gonna read Heidegger yesterday, and then I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take a break and let it just. And like when I was reading Lacan, it was like popping off a little bit and other things because he was talking about like the world of the analysis or analyst and whatnot. And he's like, "What sticks out to you in concepts?" And I'm like, "This is Heidegger," and it's like it's there, it's working. So maybe
The
it'll
silent
click.
weaving.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah. Did you want to take this part or?
Yeah, we'll go. All right. W. von Humboldt has alluded to certain languages which express the I by here, the thou by there, the he by yonder, thus rendering the personal pronouns by locative adverbs, to put it grammatically. It is controversial whether indeed the primordial signification of locative expressions is adverbial or pronominal. But this dispute loses its basis if one notes that locative adverbs have a relationship to the I qua dasein, as dasein. The here and the there and the yonder are primarily not mere ways of designating the location of entities present at hand within the world at positions in space. They are rather characteristics of Dasein's primordial spatiality. These supposedly locative adverbs are Dasein designations. They have a signification which is primarily existential, not categorial. But they are not pronouns either. Their signification is prior to the differentiation of locative adverbs and personal pronouns. These expressions have a Dasein signification which is authentically spatial and which serves as evidence that when we interpret Dasein without any theoretical distortions, we can see it immediately as being alongside the world with which it concerns itself and as being alongside it spatially. That is to say, as de-severing and giving directionality. In the here, the Dasein, which is absorbed in its world, speaks not toward itself, but away from itself, toward the yonder of something circumspectively ready to hand. Yet it still has itself in view in its existential spatiality. Dasein understands itself proximally and for the most part in terms of its world, and the Dasein with of others is often encountered in terms of what is ready to hand within the world. But even if others become themes for study, as it were, in their own Dasein, they are not encountered as person things present at hand. We meet them at work, that is, primarily in their being in the world. Even if we see the other just standing around, he is never apprehended as a human thing present at hand, but his standing around is an existential mode of being, an unconcerned, uncircumspective tarrying alongside everything and nothing. The other is encountered in his Dasein with the world. The expression Dasein, however, shows plainly that in the first instance, this entity is unrelated to others, and that of course it can still be with others afterward. Yet one must not fail to notice that we use the term Dasein with to designate that being for which the others who are freed within the world. This Dasein with of others is disclosed within the world for a Dasein, and so too for those who are Daseins with us, and only because Dasein in itself is essentially being with. The phenomenological assertion that Dasein is essentially being with has an existential ontological meaning. It does not seek to establish ontically that facticality, I am not present at hand alone, and that others of my kind occur. If this were what is meant by the proposition that Dasein's being in the world is essentially constituted by being with, then being with would not be an existential attribute with which dasein of its own accord has coming to it from its own kind of being. It would rather be something which turns up in every case by reason of the occurrence of others. Being with is an existential characteristic of dasein, even when frantically no other is present at hand or perceived. Even dasein's being alone is being with in the world. The other can be missing only in and for a being with. Being alone is a deficient mode of being with. Its very possibility is the proof of this. On the other hand, factical being alone is not obviated by the occurrence of a second example of a human being beside me, or by 10 such examples. Even if these and more are present at hand, Dasein can still be alone. So being with and the facticity of being with one another are not based on the occurrence together of several subjects. Yet being alone among many does not mean that with regard to the other being, they are merely present at hand there alongside us. Even in our being among them, they are there with us. Their Dasein with is encountered in a mode in which they are indifferent and alien. Being missing and being away are modes of Dasein with and are possible only because Dasein as being with lets the Dasein of others be encountered in its world. Being with is in every case a characteristic of one's own Dasein. Dasein with characterizes the Dasein of others to the extent that it is freed by its world for a being with. Only so far as one's own Dasein has the essential structure of being with is it Dasein with as encounterable for others. If Dasein with remains existentially constitutive for being in the world, then, like our circumspective dealings with the ready to hand within the world, which by way of anticipation we have called concern, it must be interpreted in terms of the phenomenon of care, for as care, the being of Dasein in general is to be defined. Compare with chapter 6 of this division. Concern is a character of being which being with cannot have as its own, even though being with, like concern, is a being toward entities encountered within the world. But those entities towards which Dasein as being with comports itself do not have the kind of being which belongs to equipment ready to hand. They are themselves Dasein. These entities are not objects of concern, but rather of solicitude. So I think what is kind of going on, like what I've been brewing is like this solicitude is a condition because there's a gap. So you know there's another, and you know there's an other that's that you're alongside, and that other is also toward their own thing, has their own concerns and their own involvements. And because you're allowing this Dasein to have their um you know, they got their show, you have your own show, and the gap in those two is where solicitudes is.
Okay.
I that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, it's not that it's like, oh, fuck other people, they don't care.
Yeah.
It's that, oh, because other people are caring beings, and I'm a caring being, but because there might be a gap in what our cares are, they're not wholly aligned, and that difference is solicitude. I think.
I think I get what you're saying, where it's like kind of like even when he's saying like you can be in a room with like 10 people and like you're there with them, you're not in the sense that it's like you have different care for other things. And it's like you can be alone. Like even if those in more are present at hand, Dazan could still be alone. And I think like the solicitude is that care or that like concern with like you all have your own that in common kind of, if that makes sense. says concern
Yeah.
is a characteristic of being with cannot have its own, even though being with like concern. And I know Dave was saying like care is like for equipment and solicitude is for people,
Mhm.
but I think there is a gap, like just in our like beinghood, because it's like again, I don't know if it's because of Dreyfus, he's big on like a Wittgensteinian like interpretation, or he was in his commentary. And it's like then we think of like the beetle in the box, and it's like we all say it's a beetle, but you could be seeing something else. And I think it's like we just have it in common that we want to like bridge that gap. But I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah,
if that makes
so,
sense.
yeah, so it is a gap in common.
Mm,
Um, ooh, I okay. So is that like an authentic form of the they or the das man,
hmm
where like it can be the case that there are people and it's like, yeah, fuck those people. I actually don't give a shit.
hmm
And so I would be like, oh, well, that's, just whatever. I don't care at all.
Yeah.
But then there is the case where I and another person were not aligned, but I do care and I do want to
hmm
bridge the gap.
I think though, in a way though, because like let's just take like influencers or like just like I don't give a fuck who Kim Kardashian is dating, and it's like she could die in front of me and I don't care. But I guarantee you, if like she lived with me for like a week and like we had dinners together and like I could talk to Kim, there would be solicitude, even though like we're
Hmm.
so different, but it's like she's still a human being who like
Yeah.
comports herself and has care. And there's got to be more like to it. Like Hitler
Yeah.
was still a good artist, somewhat. Like
Yeah.
so, I think.
I mean, yeah. So yeah, like a recognition of
Mm,
just the foundation of all of us. It's not
yeah,
about like what you get up to. At
yeah,
at the very core, um, you are a valid, living,
hmm
caring creature.
yeah,
Um, and recognizing that and actually giving a shit about that.
hmm
Okay. Okay. I like
yeah,
that a lot.
yeah. And I think like Dreyfus calls the they the one because he's trying to say like it's all of us in a sense. Because like other people might be like, let them fucking sit there and pick apart like Heidegger. I want to go get laid or whatever. And it's like okay, but like they still ultimately care too because they're still like concerned with the fact that what we're doing is different and it's not like it draws like that
Yeah.
aspect.
They're still doing it in relation to
Hmm
the fact that they cared enough to say, yeah, fuck those guys. I'm gonna go do
Exactly.
this. That still is, related to, yeah, for
hmm
sure, dude. For
Yeah.
sure.
And I think too, like just lastly on that, just to touch real quick, is like Becker talks about that as like a death denial mechanism where it's like
Oh,
if I'm like a Christian and I find out like Muslims exist, I hate them because it reminds me that like other religions exist. So maybe it like just makes you feel more alone, like existentially, when you know that other people have like different ways to comport themselves that don't align with you. And it like just reminds you of like your temporality and the fact that like in a way all of our like care is arbitrary
hmm.
because it's like it is the they, it's the one, like it's and you have that distanciality where it's like you don't want to like be apart from what everybody else is. And that's why like your solicitude is like trying to bridge the gap, like you're saying.
Yeah.
I know he talks about that later on, but I think this might be like preparatory. And again, I need to marinate on it more because it's like the more we talk about it, the more like the threads click, or like I'm like, let me go down this rabbit hole and see if that. But
Y-
I think that's why this is important because when like you're reading at home, if you don't like something doesn't click, you could just be all right, whatever. But it's like I can bounce an idea off you, and you could be like, no, or like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, maybe. So I
Yeah.
don't know. That's just where I'm at right now with it.
I, in this part, I keep going back to either section 23 or 24 when he kind of
Hmm.
brings in de-severance and this
Hmm.
idea. um I've been, I guess, trying to put them back together when he's talking about this spatiality. And
Hmm.
yeah, it very much like, you know, let it marinate,
Hmm.
um preheat the oven.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
um
it's all building to,
yeah.
and like Dreyfus says too, like Dave was talking about like the bubbling professor. It's like sometimes I think Heidegger may not even know what the fuck he's doing. Like he's like trying to say something, and like you ever write a paper or something or like a reflection and it just gets away from you.
Yep, dude.
And it's like I feel like sometimes that happened. Like I know he also like had to publish this.
Yeah.
So I think at some point he's just like, they're not gonna know what the fuck I'm talking about away anyway. Here you go.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was pushed
Yeah.
to publish this. Like he very much was not like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm awesome. Like he was
Yeah.
like, okay, fine, fuck it.
And it's
um
like he's like Division 3 will be where I'll like
yes,
fix it
dude.
up. So like anything I don't get, I'm just like, oh yeah, that would have been in Division 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely.
All right. Even concern with food and clothing and the nursing of the sick body are forms of solicitude. But we understand the expression solicitude in a way which corresponds to our use of concern as a term for an existential. For example, welfare work as a factical social arrangement is grounded in Dasein's state of being as being with. Its factical urgency gets its motivation in that Dasein maintains itself proximally and for the most part in the deficient modes of solicitude, being for, against, or without one another, passing one another by, not mattering to one another. These are possible ways of solicitude. And it is precisely these last named deficient and indifferent modes that characterize everyday average being with one another. These modes of being show again that characteristics of inconspicuousness and obviousness, which belong just as much to the everyday dasein with of others within the world as to the readiness to hand of the equipment with which one is daily concerned. These indifferent modes of being with one another may easily mislead ontological interpretation into interpreting this kind of being, in the first instance, as the mere being present at hand of several subjects. It seems as if only negligible variations of the same kind of being lie before us. Yet ontologically, there is an essential distinction between the indifferent way in which things at random occur together and the way in which entities who are with one another do not matter to one another. With regard to its positive modes, solicitude has two extreme possibilities. It can, as it were, take away care from the other and put itself in his position in concern. It can leap in for him. This kind of solicitude takes over for the other that with which he is to concern himself. The other is just thrown out of his own position. He steps back so that afterwards, when the matter has been attended to, he can either take it over as something finished and at his disposal or disburden himself of it completely. In such solicitude, the other can become one who is dominated and dependent, even if this domination is a tacit one and remains hidden from him. This kind of solicitude, which leaps in and takes away care, is to a large extent determinative for being with one another, and pertains for the most part to our concern with the ready to hand. In contrast to this, there is also the possibility of a kind of solicitude which does not so much leap in for the other as leap ahead of him in potentially for being. Wait, hold on. Let me reread that. In contrast to this, there's also the possibility of a kind of solicitude which does not so much leap in for the other as leap ahead of him in his existential, potentially for being, potentiality for being, not in order to take away his care, but rather to give it back to him authentically, as such for the first time. This kind of solicitude pertains essentially to an authentic care, that is, to the existence of the other, not to a what with which he is concerned. It helps the other to become to become transparent to himself in his care and to become free for it. This is where I was thinking like,
Hmm.
oh, so there can be, Dave and I were talking about McLuhan. and
Mm-hmm.
De-Severance. And we were like, okay, so is there a difference between like an authentic De-Severance and just like a random bullshit
Mm-hmm.
De-Severance? And I think that part right there kind
Mm-hmm.
of um might might be getting to that, where there can be something um that is de-severed, but it's like a legitimate concern, and so it
Mm-hmm.
is authentic in a way, whereas most of the time when something becomes de-severed, like the submarine, I don't care about the
Yeah.
submarine, it
Yeah,
doesn't
no,
matter to
exactly.
me, it's just random social nonsense. But my brother in Wyoming, if his wife were to get sick, like that's still remote and it could be de-severed, but it's
Mm-hmm.
real, and it really truly matters, and
Mm-hmm.
I would be concerned about it.
Mm-hmm. No,
Um,
I think that makes sense, and I think that goes back to like the Kim K conversation too, because when you were reading something that stuck out to me, trying to see if I can find it, because it's like he was talking about like things can be like indifferent to us, but it's like there's things in pop culture, like you're saying, that like become de-severed, but we don't want it to be. Like I'm so sick of hearing about like who's dating who and celebrity shit, but it's not present at hand to me, but it's like it becomes de-severed because like it becomes such a fucking focal point
you
that like,
can't
and I
you
know,
can't get away from
yeah,
it.
and later, like I know Heidegger brings up like idle talk and chatter and stuff like that, and I feel like when I'm at work, that's like the majority of what the ladies in the office talk about, and I'm like, who gives a fuck?
Mhm.
But it's like it's de-severed because I have to like I can't be a fucking lunatic and just be like, fuck you, I don't want to talk about this, and like it's like you have to play the game and like
Yeah, I
make it
wonder
part of your
if
world.
the fact that that kind
Hmm.
of that operation that you're doing, where it is bullshit, it doesn't matter, fuck all of it, but because you are alongside these people who do care about it,
Hmm.
you do genuinely engage with it on some level. Like that's
Hmm.
an interesting operation.
It's like you ever watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia,
I've never
where
seen it,
oh,
man.
okay,
I've
the
seen
one
the
guy
memes, but
the one guy Dennis is like trying to get laid with like younger or like Gen Z chicks, and he's like our age, and he's giving them honest feedback to what they're saying, and they don't like it. So later he just repeats everything they say, like he repeats it back to them, and then they want to have sex with them. So it's like I'm picturing like a guy who's just trying to get laid, so it's like you don't care, but it's de-severed to you because it's like your ultimate end is like getting her in bed. So you're just like, yes, 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 tell me more about this. Or like, oh, I'd love to hear about your work day at Olive Garden and like blah blah blah. In a
yeah,
way, as it like it matters to you in the sense that like you're trying to get intimacy with this girl. It might not even be getting laid. Like you just like being with her. So even though you don't care what they're talking about, it's de-severed in the sense that it's like, well, if she tells me this bullshit, I could tell her my bullshit later and she'll listen to it. If that makes
yeah.
sense.
I wonder if intent
Mm-hmm.
modifies that in any way, and takes it from just being idle chatter to being something real. Because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, yeah, if my partner comes home and wants to talk about, I don't know, Kim Kardashian, whatever, we'll use
Yeah.
that. Like, I don't give a shit. And that is just idle chatter. But also,
Mm-hmm.
like, there is a way that I could engage with that, because I do enjoy her presence.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, I don't care what we're talking about. I have, my own moral take on it, but
Mm-hmm.
also I value sitting on the couch next to you and
Exactly.
and talking with you.
That intimacy, the eye contact, the way she has certain like inflections, or like
Yep.
she may like make a joke about it that you're like, oh, okay, that's funny, or like that's what I
Yeah.
love about her. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I get
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
And at
That's
that
interesting.
point, I feel like you're saying intent or like it cannot necessarily always be chatter. Like it
Yeah.
can be, but I think that's where like the philosopher, like the edge lord, and those people fuck up because they just like. I saw
Yes.
that kid who was like named 10 books to like the OnlyFans chicks, and they were talking, and he's like, "Shut up!" And I wanted to be like, "You just don't know how to talk to girls, man." Like they probably
Yeah.
had like talk to them about other shit. Like they could tell you stuff you don't know about, and it's
For
like
sure. Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's where like the severance can be important, and it's like,
Oh, dude. Okay. So, Heidegger like valorizes, the
mm,
working class. He loves the folk, but he didn't. He was a
mm.
dickhead,
Oh yeah,
aristocratic asshole.
yeah,
And Nietzsche too, and
mm,
Schopenhauer, and even Kant was a
yeah.
fucking douchebag.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they all were, but
oh yeah,
they celebrate working people, um, or ostensibly at least,
mm,
but in their mind, they're still like, yeah, fuck those idiots. They don't know what's
mm,
good for them. Like that's um damn, I was going somewhere. But yeah, like there is value in
mm,
uh working class people sitting around talking about dicks and farts
mm.
and
Yeah,
Kim Kardashian. Like there's value to be found there. It's not
mm,
all meaningless. Uh
drivel that yeah,
yeah. I think there's a lot more there that
oh yeah, because that's what like I had to like teach like certain. I had to teach myself that, and then like I learned like on deployments, like you had the guy who like chief would ask you, and he'd be like, "What's everybody doing on this weekend?" And this kid would always be like, "I'm gonna sit in my room and be sad." And I'm like, "Stop saying that shit," because like I know you're not gonna kill yourself, but he doesn't. So I'm like, just play the game and tell him like. You're gonna
Mhm.
go to the gym, or you're coming over to my place to play video games, or whatever. Then do whatever the fuck you want and watch anime. But it's like you have to learn how to talk to people and make what's important to them important if you want to like get by. Like you gotta if you want to have a good barber, you gotta listen to his bullshit or whatever.
Mhm.
So like he'll like and same with the mechanic and other shit. So it just goes back to like rational intelligence versus like common sense intelligence too, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's
definitely.
the big thing. And a lot of the aristocrats like don't know how to do that. And I think they get mad at that. And maybe that's what they're jealous of with the peasants too and
Mm,
stuff. But I mean, we can sit there and unpack that till like fucking
like a
or
like a,
yeah,
a reverse ressentiment.
yeah,
I like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. Well,
All
I can
right.
take over whenever you want me to. Just let me know.
All right. Yeah, you can jump on. I think second paragraph of 159. Solicitude.
And I think I was looking for a quote. 123.
Yeah, dude, the pagination on
Oh, I
this
found
is
it. Yeah, no,
fucking
it's kind of.
I love it.
Oh yeah. Uh, Solicitude proves to be a state of Dazon's being, one which, in accordance with its different possibilities, is bound up with its being towards the world of its concern, and likewise with its authentic being towards itself. Being with one another is based proximally and often exclusively upon what is a matter of common concern in such being. A being with one another which arises from one's doing the same thing as someone else not only keeps for the most part within the outer limits, but enters the mode of distance and reserve. The being with one another of those who are hired for the same affair often thrives only on mistrust. On the other hand, when they devote themselves to the same affair in common, their doing so is determined by the manner in which their dasein, each in its own way, has been taken hold of. They thus become authentically bound together, and this makes possible the right kind of objectivity which frees the other in his freedom for himself. Everyday being with one another maintains itself between the two extremes of positive solicitude, that which leaps in and dominates, and that which leaps forth and liberates. It brings numerous mixed forms to maturity. To describe these and classify them would take us beyond the limits of this investigation. Just as circumspection belongs to concern as a way of discovering what is ready to hand, solicitude is guided by considerateness and forbearance. Like solicitude, these can range through their respective deficient and indifferent modes up to the point of inconsiderateness, or the perfunctoriness for which indifference leads the way. The world not only frees the ready to hand as entities encountered within the world, it also frees dasein, the others in their dasein with. But dasein's own most meaning of being is such that this entity, which has been freed environmentally, is being in the same world in which, as encounterable for others, it is there with them. We have interpreted worldhood as that referential totality which constitutes significance, section 18. In being familiar with the significance and previously understanding it, dasein lets what is ready to hand be encountered as discovered in its involvement. In dasein's being, the context of references or assignments which significant implies is tied up with dasein's ownmost being, a being which essentially can have no involvement, but which is rather that being for the sake of which dasein itself is as it is. According to the analysis which we have now completed, being with others belongs to the being of dasein, which is an issue for dasein in its very being. Thus, as being with, dasein is essentially for the sake of others. This must be understood as an existential statement as to its essence. Even if the particular factical dasein does not turn to others and supposes that it has no need of them or manages to get along without them, it is in the way of being with. And being with as the existential for the sake of others, these have already been disclosed in their dasein. With their being with, their disclosedness has been constituted beforehand. This disclosedness also goes to make up significance, that is to say, worldhood. And significance as worldhood is tied up with the existential for the sake of which. Since the worldhood of that world in which dasein essentially is thus constituted, it accordingly lets us encounter what is environmentally ready to hand as something with which we are circumspectively concerned. And it does so in such a way that together with it we encounter the dasein with of others. The structure of the world's worldhood is such that others are not proximately present at hand as free-floating subjects along with other things, but show themselves in the world in their special environmental being, and do so in terms of what is ready to hand in the world. Being with is such that the disclosedness of the dasein with of others belongs to it. This means that because dasein's being is being with, its understanding of being already implies the understanding of others. This understanding, like any understanding, is not an acquaintance derived from knowledge about them, but a primordially existential kind of being, which more than anything else makes such knowledge and acquaintance possible. Knowing oneself is grounded in being with, which understands primordially, it operates proximately in accordance with the kind of being which is closest to us, being in the world, as being with. And it does so by an acquaintance with that which dasein, along with others, comes across in its environmental circumspection and concerns itself with an acquaintance in which dasein understands. Solicitous concern, or solititious concern, is understood in terms of what we are concerned with and along with our understanding of it. Thus, in concernful solicitude, the other is proximately disclosed. But because solicitude dwells proximally and for the most part in the deficient, or at least the indifferent modes, in the indifference of passing one another by, the kind of knowing oneself, which is essential and closest, demands that one become acquainted with oneself. And when indeed one's knowing oneself gets lost in such ways as aloofness, hiding oneself away, or putting on a disguise, being with one another must follow special routes of its own in order to come close to others or even to see through them. For the part where he's talking about, and when indeed one knowing oneself gets lost in such ways as aloofness, hiding oneself away, or putting on a disguise, I think that part was a little bit like hazy for me the first time I read it. And he's just talking about like how we can be strangers to like our own self or like just our concerns possibly, if that makes sense. Like almost like he's like giving like a precursor to like inauthenticity.
Yeah, I think that's it. And actually, I was gonna loft like 15 words, but the fact, yeah, inauthenticity, that's it. Um, and the fact that we get there without being cognizant of it because
Mm-hmm,
we get wrapped up in this
mm-hmm,
extimate shit, which again, like I think extimacy comes from this. Like
mm-hmm.
it's
Oh
um
yeah.
yeah, inauthenticities. And I don't think he's mentioned that
No, I
yet
don't think
at
so
all.
either. I think that
Yeah.
was like the first, because it really stuck out for me because it kind of like just comes out like he's
Yeah.
talking about others and stuff, and then it's like, okay, now he's kind of like giving that to you. And I know later he talks about like the they and how like there's a quote that stands out later about like we forget what is primordial and later like
Hmm.
stuff we already know becomes popular again. I feel like he's just like giving that precursor to like
Yeah.
people get lost in the sauce, so to speak. Because like you know how
Yeah.
people have like midlife crises at like 40 and they're like, I don't know who I am, and it's like you do in a way because you know you've been wearing a mask or a disguise for like so long. So I
Yeah.
think he's just like setting that up, if you will. But yeah, I
Yeah,
just wanted to
definitely.
speak on that real quick. All right, where are we? But just as opening oneself up or closing oneself off is grounded in one's having being with one another as one's kind of being at the time, and indeed is nothing else but this, even the explicit disclosure of the other and solicitude grows only out of one's primarily being with him in each case. Such a disclosure of the other, which is indeed thematic, but not in the manner of theoretical psychology, easily becomes the phenomenon which proximately comes to view when one considers the theoretical problematic of understanding the psychical life of others. In this phenomenally proximal manner, it thus presents a way of being with one another understandingly, but at the same time it gets taken as that which primordially and in the beginning constitutes being towards others and makes it possible at all. This phenomenon, which is none too happily designated as empathy, is then supposed, as it were, to provide the first ontological bridge from one's own subject, which is given proximately as alone, to the other subject, which is proximately quite closed off. Of course, being towards others is ontologically different from being towards things which are present at hand. The entity which is other has itself the same kind of being as dasein. In being with and towards others, there is thus a relationship of being from dasein to dasein. But it might be said that this relationship is already constitutive for one's own dasein, which in its own right has an understanding of being and which thus relates itself towards dasein. The relationship of being which one has towards others would then become a projection of one's own being towards oneself into something else. The other would be a duplicate of the self. But while these deliberations seem obvious enough, it is easy to see that they have little ground to stand on. The presupposition which this argument demands that Dasein's being towards itself is being towards another fails to hold. As long as the legitimacy of this presupposition has not turned out to be evident, one may still be puzzled as to how Dasein's relationship to itself is thus to be disclosed to the other as other. Not only is being towards others an autonomous, irreducible relationship of being, this relationship as being with is one which with Dazan's being already is. Of course, it is indisputable that a lively mutual acquaintanceship on the basis of being with often demands upon how far one's own Dasein has understood itself at the time. But this means that it depends only upon how far one's essential being with others has made itself transparent and has not disguised itself. And that is possible only if Dasein, as being in the world, already is with others. Empathy does not first how do you say that? Constitute being
Mhm.
with only on the basis of being with does empathy become possible. It gets its motivation from the unsociability of the dominant modes of being with. Sorry, brain fart. But the fact that empathy is not a primordial existential phenomenon any more than is knowing in general does not mean that there is nothing problematic about it. The special hermeneutic of empathy will have to show how being with one another and Dazan's knowing of itself are led astray and obstructed by the various possibilities of being which Dazan itself possesses, so that a genuine understanding gets suppressed and Dazan takes refuge, substitutes the possibility of understanding the stranger correctly presupposes such a hermeneutic as it is a positive existential condition. Our analysis has shown that being with is an existential constituent of being in the world. Dasein with has proved to be a kind of being which entities encounters within the world have as their own. So far as Dasein is at all, it has being with another as its kind of being. I highlighted that part just because I felt like he's really hammering in the being with others and how like encountering other Daseins and beings is like part of what makes us just more about like we don't exist in a vacuum. We exist with others. I just feel like he's really hammering that that's a part of like what makes Dasein being with.
Yeah, it even like you could say so these I'm the main character people,
Mm-hmm.
they are the NPCs because they are doing the thing for the algorithm. They are
Yep.
doing the thing that they think is going to get them what they want when they're
Mm-hmm.
disregarding all the others. That is the actual NPC behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas those of us who are aware that, like, no, we fundamentally like rely on others to create,
Mm-hmm.
just as much as our own actions make us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Our situatedness and our context creates
Mm-hmm.
even the possibilities, the conditions of possibility for our own action. So
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. And it's all bound up in like those roles and the forsake of witches. And it's like, as
yeah,
an influencer, like, what are you influencing? And
yeah,
it's like you're dubbing something or like using an audio that's already there and like doing the same thing and barely tweaking it. And it's like you're saying you're the main character and you didn't even come up with that. And it's just, it's like Kafkaesque at this point that you're just
yeah.
like, they don't even see the irony and it's staring them in the face.
See, I
And I,
on the surface, yes,
mm-hmm.
they don't see it. I think to go deeper, I think they do feel it. Maybe they don't,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they can't, articulate it. Maybe they can't even admit it to themselves. I think they feel it, and I think that's probably why it becomes manic, like so out of control for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these people. Because they know the thing that they're doing is getting them further away from what they truly want.
Mm-hmm.
But they're so committed to doing the thing that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, again, I guess that's kind of just to temper it, just to say that they they are also, beings in the world with their own involvements and their own concerns.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to write them off But if we want to do some extraction and bracket some shit out, then yes,
Hmm.
they are the silly
Hmm.
robots. Um,
Because
yeah,
at that point, it's almost like you're not interacting with them as daseins. You're interacting with the algorithm itself. And like you're saying, like
exactly.
you were saying at the start, I don't know who's being recorded about the AI, and like it's like we're already doing it,
Yeah, dude.
and it's like we're not interfacing. So it's like
Yeah.
you're just
Input
kind of
output,
like,
dude. We're all
yeah,
Chinese rooms.
yeah,
Um,
honestly, but yeah.
Philip K. Dick, more human than human.
Hmm.
Um, like the machines that replace us will be more human than
Hmm.
we are. Like
Yeah, no.
it's not that robots are going to replace us. It's that things that are more human than we currently have, or than
Hmm.
we've allowed ourselves to become.
Yeah.
That is what's going to move into the empty space that we
Mm.
we vacate.
And it's like I went for a walk, I think yesterday, and like I'm on my phone all the time too. Like we were talking about in that workshop, but it's like everybody's on their fucking phone, and it's like I think it at some point it becomes where it's like this isn't reality, and it's like okay, when are we gonna be done doing this so I can get back to my real world, which is like the phone, and it's like
Yeah, man.
we were talking about how it's that like need. I think Philip was talking about like he'll like hit up a girl or whatever because he wants intimacy and stuff like that. And I just feel like the minute there's like a lull in a conversation or
Pick up the
like space, it's like you pick it up and it's like that's the machine. It's like you're just like I need more inputs, I need more inputs. And it's like just you need that time to like let shit marinate, to like let it come to you and have inspiration and the slowness and the tarrying along. And it's like
yeah,
we're just outsourcing all that shit.
when everything becomes equally desevered, when
Mm-hmm.
everything
Mm-hmm.
is like flattened out and like nothing matters. Like yeah, we're fucking Chinese rooms.
Yeah, honestly.
Um, yeah. But also, I
And
mean,
that's nihilism, I feel like, at that point.
yeah. Ah, yeah, there is there is something worth fighting for. There is a
Mm-hmm.
future. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And there is because I believe that there is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there may not be. We may be fucked. Like,
But the only thing that makes me think we're not is like when you were saying when you're with your partner and it's like they're talking about like Kim Kardashian or whatever, and they're just repeating the thing. It's like there's subtleties of her that breaks out where it's like,
yeah.
oh, okay, that smile or that like, which is like her essence in a way. Like it's not, but it is because
Yeah.
it's
So
like,
the
yeah.
phenomenon, like the phenomenology, like
Hmm.
the temporality, the things as events, people as
Hmm.
events, that that is, I guess, the human domain.
Hmm.
Whereas the technological domain is just everything all at once. Everything is flattened
Hmm.
out.
Yeah.
We have the unique position of being these temporal beings.
Hmm.
And we have being toward death. We have something to live for in the condition of something, something to lose. We can lose
Hmm.
ourselves. So that's
Yeah, it
something,
levels you.
yeah. Um, yeah. I don't know. I guess it can tend to get pretty dark, but
Oh yeah. No, I get like that though, where it's like I have moods where I'm just like I'm just gonna be full of like hopeless despair tonight, and I'm just like fuck, like I don't know, man, like
yep.
how much I can like protest or throw into the echo chamber because it's like AI can regurgitate 47 other fucking things and like a girl could do a TikTok dance and I'll pick up. But it's like I think we're getting to the point now though where like more people are becoming aware where it's like hitting that tipping point and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, what can I do? And it's like that's where the Hegel, the Hegelian in me comes back, and it's like, okay, what's going to be the next antithesis or whatever? And it's like you just gotta like hold out.
Yeah, movement,
Yeah.
directionality, what is coming next. Something is
Hmm.
undeniably coming next.
Yeah.
And at the very least, that's a good thing because right now it's
Hmm.
currently untenable.
Yeah. It's but
Yeah.
that got
But
dark.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, like we're using
Hmm.
these platforms, we're using the internet, we're using all this
That's true.
technology to to do this, to further our own
Hmm.
understanding. But
That's true.
like it's not just my own understanding of this. Like I truly
Hmm.
believe doing this in a collectivity,
Hmm.
um, there, there is a telos to all this. I don't know where the hell it's leading up to, but
Yeah.
I could sit at home and just read books and, you
Hmm.
know, content myself with having all this knowledge or understanding. But no, I'm not. Like I feel the need to do that
Yeah.
collectively and in concert with
This
other
is
people.
masturbating at that point, though, in a way,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
intellectually, because it's
for
like you're
sure.
not like doing anything with it. You're not like it's safe because you could just be, oh, I don't understand that, or this doesn't feed into my. And it's like
Yeah,
you need
and
that dialogue, the dialectical.
any understanding you could get from that wouldn't be valid
No.
because it would be pretend in your little pretend world where you're a separate entity. You're
Hmm.
apart from
Hmm.
um you're not apart. And if you want to pretend that you are, then that invalidates your I'm like,
Yeah,
no, you're
100%.
wrong.
Yeah,
Like you're just wrong.
like people reading thus spoke Zarathustra. I'm like he came down from the mountain for a reason. Like I don't know, but yeah, no, I'm definitely with you there. Where were we? Was it? I think I read up to this cannot be conceived. Does that sound right?
Yes, yeah. And
Okay,
being
okay,
with one another as its kind of being.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So this cannot be conceived as a summative result of the occurrence of several subjects. Even to come across a number of subjects becomes possible only if the others who are concerned proximally in their dasein with are treated merely as numerals. Such a number of subjects gets discovered only by a definite being with and towards one another. This inconsiderate being with reckons with the others without seriously counting on them, or without even wanting to have anything to do with them. One's own dasein, like the dasein with of others, is encountered proximally and for the most part in terms of the with world with which we are environmentally concerned. When dasein is absorbed in the world of its concern, that is at the same time in its being with towards others. It is not itself. Who is it then who has taken over being as everyday being with one another?
Who
27,
is it?
every day. Yeah. I had that part underlined when Dasein or highlighted when Dasein is absorbed in the world of its concern. This is at the same time in its being with towards others. It is not itself. Who is it then? Who has taken over being is every day with one another? And again, I just think that goes back to what we're saying that like we're absorbed in our concern and like working with others and just getting out of that isolated metaphysics and like just mode of existence.
Hmm.
I'm also going to take another pee break real quick.
Good idea. Me too.
BRB. I also feel like this goes by faster, like when you're actually reading it out loud than when I'm like reading it on my own. Because it's like I get more
Yeah.
distracted. Even if I'm like not on my phone or doing anything else, I just like, I don't know. I just feel like this engages with it a little bit more. Because when
Yeah.
you're reading it out loud, you can like multitask, but I feel like you're absorbing it a little bit more. I don't know why. It's like you're having a conversation, but
Yeah. We've been, well, I personally, I got to a point like last year, I was
mhm,
like, I can't even read. I can't even read anymore. Like I didn't have
mhm,
the attention span or the patience or the discipline. Like I just
okay,
couldn't fucking do it. Um,
same.
and it's, yeah, we're trying new things. Like this
Yeah.
is not really a well-established thing of doing like small
Mhm,
reading groups that like all this shit is kind of an experiment. And
mhm,
I I love it, dude. Like I
mhm.
love reading books this way.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely better to like than like a book club where like I like in class that we'll pick paragraphs and stuff like that, but I think like this method too is a nice supplemental because it's like I could be like, hey, I don't know what the fuck this means, or like you'll say something and then they click and it just kind of like forces you. Because even like what Dave was saying, like I like stop and I don't know a word, and I look it up, I get lost for like, and then it's like, does that really help clarify things more than if I just move the fuck on, you know?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, because at that point, like shit like that becomes a justification for dicking off.
yep,
Like you're like, oh well, oh that's an interesting fact on Wikipedia. Let me click
yep.
this link and let me click that link. Like,
And then I
um,
forget what the word means anyway,
yeah,
and I have
dude.
to like go back, and then I just get
Yeah,
mad at myself. But yeah,
yeah.
no. Do you mind taking over for a little bit? I think we were at
Word.
27.
Everyday being, section 27, everyday being oneself and the they. The ontologically relevant result of our analysis of being with is the insight that the subject character of one's own dasein and that of others is to be defined existentially. That is, in terms of certain ways in which one may be. In that with which we concern ourselves environmentally, the others are encountered as what they are. They are what they do. In one's concern with what one has taken hold of, whether with, for, or against the others, there is constant care as to the way one differs from them, whether that difference is merely one that is to be evened out, whether one's own Dasein has lagged behind the others and wants to catch up in relationship to them, or whether one's Dasein already has some priority over them and sets out to keep them suppressed. The care about this distance between them is disturbing to being with one another, though this disturbance is one that is hidden from it. If we may express this existentially, such being with one another has the character of distantiality. The more inconspicuous this kind of being is to everyday Dasein itself, all the more stubbornly and primordially does it work itself out. But this distantiality, which belongs to being with, is such that Dasein, as everyday being with one another, stands in subjection to others. It itself is not its being. Its being has been taken away by the others. Dasein's everyday possibilities of being are for the others to dispose of as they please. These others, moreover, are not definite others. On the contrary, any other can represent them. What is decisive is just that inconspicuous domination by others, which has already been taken over unawares from Dasein as being with. One belongs to the others oneself and enhances their power. The others, whom one thus designates in order to cover up the fact of one's belonging to them essentially oneself, are those who proximally and for the most part are there in everyday being with one another. The who is not this one, not that one, not oneself, not some people, and not the sum of them all. The who is the neuter, the they, das Man.
I
And
think
yeah,
that is it right there,
yeah,
honestly. because it's like it's not any one like how we always say it's like the man
Hmm.
and like they, and it's like it's not like just a bunch, even though it is reptilian overlords like
Yeah.
choosing the election, it's also like all of us or like the one, I think, because it's like on the contrary, any other can represent them. And I think like just hearing you read it out loud about distantiality really like hit it in where it's like we really don't like sticking out because that's the nail that gets pounded. Like everybody says we're an individual and all that shit, but it's like if you go in a room and everybody's talking about something you don't know what they're talking about, it sucks. Like I used to have a joke like at my first duty station where I'd just say I'm relevant if I didn't know what the fuck they were talking about to like just bring it back. And it like took off because it's like you feel like excluded and it doesn't feel good. And it's like you're just like, how do I get back into the norm? And it's like you want to correct yourself. Like Dreyfus talks about like distance and like talking and how like in the game Second Life or like World of Warcraft, you still do that distance because it's like it feels uneasy. Like if I was like talking to you like this the whole time, you're gonna be like, dude, you good? Like, and it's like I want to get back to normal.
Yeah. Um, yeah, this like fiction of
Hmm.
it's like an idealized um fiction, but we all buy into it and we
Hmm.
constantly like reify it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's bullshit.
Hmm. And
I
the thing
wonder
is, too, sorry, go ahead.
I wonder how much of that is leave me alone so I can get back to my own sphere of concern, my own involvements, and
Hmm.
how much of that is anxiety of like I want to belong. Like how much of it is let me play with my toys over here, and how
Hmm.
much of it is while I'm playing with my tools, don't go inside the house. I want you out. Like
Yeah.
I think it's
No,
probably like this tension where we want to be alone, but we want to belong.
I feel like you're reading my diary right now, honestly, because it's like I've been talking to this girl. Hopefully, she doesn't watch this. And it's like I'll miss her sometimes, and I want to talk to her, and we'll be FaceTiming. And then I just want to like be like Andy, like I don't want to play with you anymore. Like I want to go read philosophy and like be me. But then it's like other times I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, tell me I'm handsome and like blah blah blah.
Dude, I with like when my partner goes out of town,
Yeah,
I can't fucking sleep. Like it's
yeah,
horrible. Like it, but when she's home, I'll be in here reading or on a
yep,
fucking call or doing something. It's like I don't want to interact with you. I want you to be present at hand. I
yes,
don't like
yes,
I want you to be there. Um, but I'm not gonna do anything with you. I just want to know that you're right there.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly. It's that like my therapist talks about that. It's like that balance between like being with others and then being on your own, and it's like finding that like middle ground.
Solitude and solicitude.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing. But it's like we're all, I think we forget though that like we're all part of the one or the they in some aspect too, because it's like you're still participating. Like
Mhm.
if I was wearing like a Renaissance costume during this reading, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on? And like if I just didn't talk about it at all, it would just throw it off,
Just
Like, yeah.
just don't mention it. Yeah.
Yeah, like it would just like everybody would be distracted the entire time or would be like trying to like fix it because it's like you do need the they sometimes because then like everything's arbitrary.
Yeah. And I think there is a distinction um between I don't like the language, but I think you could use the language of like an authentic
Hmm.
they and an inauthentic they. And there are those moments when it is authentic. It like we do rely
Hmm.
on the social order, we do rely on norms, we do
Hmm.
rely on these things um to allow us to come into ourselves and even um do something authentic.
Hmm.
But I don't, maybe not even most of the time, but just in so many other cases, it is just bullshit and it is
Yeah.
bad.
Like,
But
I
again,
think that, I'm sorry.
just I have to always try to be careful to not put value judgments on this because this is not a
Yeah.
value judgment thing. Like this is
Hmm.
not an ethics. This is a description of what's going on.
That's true too. I think though, like, not to bring up a loaded subject, but like when it comes up to like gender, I think the reason so many normies get pissed off at it is because it makes them realize everything's arbitrary. So it's like you do need like to rein it in at some point, just because it's like, or even like obesity or something about like people getting mad about like seats on a plane. But it's like we need to make fucking planes. So you need some standard that can like, or the carry on and the weight, because like it functions for society. And I think that's where like people get uncomfortable because it's like sometimes there is the inauthentic and then the authentic they. And it's like that's when the value judgment comes in. And it's like, how do we base like when the standard is? Like marriage is between a man and a woman. If gays get married, what are fish gonna get married next? And it's like, no, like there's so I think it
Yeah,
just opens up that like constructivist. But I,
which
I don't think it's completely arbitrary. I think like I don't know if you've read like Per Sig, like you could almost say like value and quality judgments guide it because we try to get rid of whatever doesn't serve us. Like we don't have horses to get to work anymore because that wouldn't make sense.
yeah, I mean, I really am down with a very constructivist point of view. Like not
No,
entirely, not
same.
completely, but that that constructivist point of view is legit. And but also there are things that are maladaptive and we do respond to them by like, no, that is bad. That doesn't help us achieve our goals. And so we're
Hmm.
going to get rid of it. And things that do help us achieve our goals are
Hmm.
good. And so we do include them in this
Hmm.
moving, constantly groundless grounds. It's all groundless
Hmm.
grounds, and
Yeah.
I'm fully okay with that. I get it.
Hmm.
I don't care. There's no ground down at the bottom, turtles all the way down.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. Like we
No,
need a
definitely.
functional, like a functional foundation, and it doesn't matter that even that foundation itself is kind of bullshit because everything
Hmm.
is bullshit.
Yeah, but like it's like Richard Dawkins has a thing where like he's talking about people with evolution and saying it doesn't matter if you care. So it's like if you don't believe in gravity, jump out a window. So it's like some things we have to just be like, that's a given for us. Or like
Yeah.
you call 911, an ambulance is gonna come. And like you
Yep.
need that standard. Even though if you do like mushrooms, you're like, there is no ambulance, there is no separate be. It's like
Yeah.
there's a time to put on each hat, kind of.
Yeah.
Is like
Yeah, for
I'm with
sure.
you on that one. But I just feel like these last few pages are like the best of the chapter.
Yeah.
Like it just really hits it. So I just wanted to talk about that early on. But yeah, that's all I had to say.
Awesome.
I think we're at we have shown earlier how in the
Yeah.
environment. Okay.
We have shown earlier how in the environment, which lies closest to us, the public environment already is ready to hand. It is also a matter of concern. In utilizing public means of transport and in making use of information services, such as the newspaper, every other is like the next. This being with one another dissolves one's own dasein completely into the kind of being of the others in such a way, indeed, that the others, as distinguishable and explicit, vanish more and more. The one, in this inconspicuousness and unascertainability, the real dictatorship of the they is unfolded. We take pleasure and enjoy ourselves as they take pleasure. We read, see, and judge about literature and art as they see and judge. Likewise, we shrink back from the great mass as they shrink back. We find shocking what they find shocking. The they, which is nothing definite, and which all are, though not as the sum, prescribes the kind of being of everydayness. The they has its own ways in which to be. That tendency of being with, which we have called distantiality, is grounded in the fact that being with one another concerns itself as such with averageness, which is an existential characteristic of the they. The they, in its being, essentially makes an issue of this. Thus, the they maintains itself practically in the averageness of that which belongs to it, of that which it regards as valid and that which it does not, and of that to which it grants success and to that which it denies it. In this averageness with which it prescribes what can and may be ventured, it keeps watch over everything exceptional that thrusts itself to the fore. Every kind of priority gets noiselessly suppressed. Overnight, everything that is primordial gets glossed over as something that has long been well known. Everything gained by a struggle becomes just something to be manipulated. Every secret loses its force. This care of averageness reveals in turn an essential tendency of dasein, which we call the leveling down of all possibilities of being. Distantiality, averageness, and leveling down as ways of being for the they constitute what we know as publicness. Publicness proximally controls every way in which the world and dasein get interpreted, and it is always right. Not because there is some distinctive and primary relationship of being in which it is related to the things, or because it avails itself of some transparency on the part of dasein which it has explicitly appropriated, but because it is insensitive to every difference of level and of genuineness and thus never gets to the heart of the matter. By publicness, everything gets obscured, and what has thus been covered up gets passed off as something familiar and accessible to everyone. The they is there alongside everywhere, but in such a manner that it has always stolen away whenever dasein presses for a decision. Yet because the they presents every judgment and decision as its own, it deprives the particular dasein of its answerability. The they can, as it were, manage to have them constantly invoking it. It can be answerable for everything most easily because it is not someone who needs to vouch for anything. It was always the they who did it. And yet it can be said that it has been no one. In Dasein's everydayness, the agency through which most things come about is one of which we must say it was no one. Thus, the particular Dasein in its everydayness is disburdened by the they. Not only that, by thus disburdening it of its being, the they accommodates Dasein. If Dasein has any tendency to take things easily and make them easy. And because the they constantly accommodates the particular Dasein by disburdening it of its being, the they retains and enhances its stubborn dominion. Everyone is the other, and no one is himself. The they, which supplies the answer to the question of the who of everyday Dasein, is the nobody to whom every Dasein has already surrendered itself in being among one another. In these characters of being which we have exhibited, everyday being among one another, distantiality, averageness, leveling down, publicness, the disburdening of one's being, and accommodation, lies that constancy of Dasein which is closest to us. This constancy pertains not to the enduring being present at hand of something, but rather to Dasein's kind of being as being with. Neither the self of one's own Dasein nor the self of the other has as yet found itself or lost itself as long as it is in the modes we have mentioned. In these modes, one's way of being is that of inauthenticity and failure to stand by oneself. To be in this way signifies no lessening of Dasein's facticity, just as the they, as the nobody, is by no means nothing at all. On the contrary, in this kind of being, Dasein is an ens relatium, if by reality we understand a being with the character of Dasein. Of course, the they is as little present at hand as Dasein itself. The more openly the they behaves, the harder it is to grasp, and the slyer it is, but the less it is nothing at all. If we see it ontologically with an unprejudiced eye, it reveals itself as the realist subject of everydayness. And even if it is not accessible like a stone that is present at hand, this is not in the least decisive as to its kind of being. One may neither decree prematurely that this they is really nothing, nor profess the opinion that one can interpret this phenomenon ontologically by somehow explaining it as what results from taking the being present at hand together of several subjects, then fitting them together. On the contrary, in working out concepts of being, one must direct one's course by these phenomena, which cannot be pushed aside. Furthermore, the they is not something like a universal subject, which a plurality of subjects have hovering above them. One can come to take it this way only if the being of such subjects is understood as having a character other than that of dasein, and if these are regarded as cases of a genus of occurrences, cases which are factually present at hand. With this approach, the only possibility ontologically is that everything which is not a case of this sort is to be understood in the sense of genus and species. The they is not the genus to which the individual dasein belongs, nor can we come across it in such entities as an abiding characteristic. That even the traditional logic fails us when confronted with these phenomena is not surprising if we bear in mind that it has its foundation in an ontology of the present at hand, an ontology which, moreover, is still a rough one. So no matter in how many ways this logic may be improved and expanded, it cannot in principle be made any more flexible. Such reforms of logic oriented toward the humane sciences only increase the ontological confusion. The they is an existential, and as a primordial phenomenon, it belongs to Dasein's positive constitution. It itself has, in turn, various possibilities of becoming concrete as something characteristic of Dasein. The extent to which its dominion becomes compelling and explicit may change in the course of history. The self of everyday Dasein is the they self, which we distinguish from the authentic self, that is, from the self which has been taken hold of in its own way. As they self, the particular Dasein has been dispersed into the they and must first find itself. This dispersal characterizes the subject of that kind of being which we know as concernful absorption in the world we encounter as closest to us. If Dasein is familiar with itself as they self, this means at the same time that the they itself prescribes that way of interpreting the world and being in the world which lies closest. Dasein is for the sake of the they in an everyday manner, and the they itself articulates the referential context of significance. When entities are encountered, Dasein's word frees them for a totality of involvements with which the they is familiar, and within the limits which have been established with the they's averageness. Proximally, practical Dasein is in the world, which is discovered in an average way. Proximally, it is not I, in the sense of my own self, that am, but rather the others, whose way is that of the they. In terms of the they, and as the they, I am given proximally to myself. Proximally, Dasein is they, and for the most part, it remains so. If Dasein discovers the world in its own way and brings it close, if it discloses to itself its own authentic being, then this discovery of the world and this disclosure of Dasein are always accomplished as a clearing away of concealments and obscurities, as a breaking up of the disguises with which Dasein bars its own way. With this interpretation of being with and being oneself in the they, the question of the who of the everydayness of being with one another is answered. These considerations have at the same time brought us a concrete understanding of the basic constitution of Dasein. Being in the world, in its everydayness and averageness, has become visible. From the kind of being which belongs to the they, the kind which is closest, everyday Dasein draws its pre-ontological way of interpreting its being. In the first instance, ontological interpretation follows the tendency to interpret it this way. It understands Dasein in terms of the world and comes across it as an entity within the world. But that is not all. Even that meaning of being on the basis of which these subject entities get understood is one which that ontology of Dasein which is closest to us lets itself present in terms of the world. But because the phenomenon of the world itself gets passed over in this absorption in the world, its place gets taken by what is present at hand within the world, namely, things. The being of those entities which are there with us gets conceived as presence at hand. Thus, by exhibiting the positive phenomenon of the closest everyday being in the world, we have made it possible to get an insight into the reason why an ontological interpretation of this state of being has been missing. This very state of being and its everyday kind of being is what proximally misses itself and covers itself up. If the being of everyday being with one another is already different in principle from pure presence at hand, in spite of the fact that it is seemingly close to it ontologically, still less can the being of the authentic self be conceived as presence at hand. Authentic being oneself does not rest upon an exceptional condition of the subject, a condition that has been detached from the they. It is rather an existential modification of the they as an essential existential. But in the case, there's ontologically a gap separating the self-sameness of the authentically existing self from the identity of that I, which maintains itself throughout its manifold experiences. Bum, bum, bum,
Oh,
bum.
nice.
So I think that we covered most of what I have
Hmm.
got out of this chapter. This end part is kind of like um I maybe drawing our attention to like this social world that we live in,
Hmm.
and we like there are things we have to do to get along, and then there are things that we do um because we are self-centered, and we're
Hmm.
pursuing our own goals rather than uh something that might benefit others or whatever. But yeah, ultimately, like we are social beings, and we're made
Hmm.
up of all the things around us, and we matter only because of the things around us, and also the things around us matter only because they matter to us already.
Hmm.
And then um also we're all part of the they. We're all
Hmm.
like we all do that. We all participate in that. And to escape that, you have to come down like come down that staircase that you think you've ascended with all your success and social. I distinguished myself in this way,
Hmm.
and like all that shit is bullshit. You really
Hmm.
truly have to come down to like base
It's
level.
leveling you. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
I think it's the most like sociological too, but the reason why it's still like philosophy is because like he's not like just talking about how norms are, like he's talking about how it's like intrinsic to our being itself and how that has its own like a sociologist is just going to be like norms are just blah 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 subject objects metaphysics without realizing they're doing it. And Heidegger is like no, like it's intrinsic to like dasein, it's intrinsic to like das man, like they. So I think that's what like separates it because he's saying that the they is an existential. So it's
mhm.
like instead of categories, it's like part of like our existence itself. And I think that's just like, I know it may seem subtle to like non-philosophy people, but I think that's a big deal that like, because like I'm getting a I just got a like an associate's in sociology, which means nothing, but it just is like a subtle difference that I don't think like sociologists would really pick up on.
Yeah,
And it's like when Durkheim and all these other people are talking about like normlessness states, technically it doesn't exist. There is no
right.
normlessness state because that itself is part of the matrix that makes up the social milieu.
Yeah,
And it's
as a
like,
language like as language creatures, like that is prior to everything
mhm.
else.
And it like it exists in the sense that like that's built into the system and that's the word for it, but it's still like exists within the greater context. And like Dreyfus was talking about how like even when you're like trying to like change something in the system, that is already pre-built into the system itself in a way because it's like you're using what you already know in roles and using that to like put a little crack in it, but you can't abandon everything because it's like his book, Heidegger himself, he's like trying to challenge like phenomenal like philosophy, like challenge Kant, everybody else. But he has to use like everyday language and modify it and push it to like its furthest boundaries to try to shake people up, but it's still built into the system in a way. So he has to like use it to like show if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, you can't get outside of it. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
he's like trying
Exactly.
to explain to people is like you can't get
You are
outside
the
this stuff.
problem too. So,
Yeah. Um, and like as a consequence of that, like he has to try to show us that from inside.
mhm. No, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
there is no escaping the matrix.
Yeah.
There is no matrix, but there is a matrix. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah. It's the well, and that's yeah.
and I
That I
don't
mean
mean it in
there's
like a hopeless sense either. Just in like the ways to fix it is already part of it,
yeah. Well, I
just
mean you
as
could
like part of
say
the process.
yeah, it's dialectical. And
Exactly.
that's like I like yeah, I think I'm reading Heidegger through this Marxist lens and this
Mm-hmm.
Hegelian lens, which um I'm okay with that, and I try to be aware of that so that I can see what Heidegger is doing rather than
Mm-hmm.
just trying to, oh yeah, I remember this. I
Yeah.
read this in, you know. But I mean, yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, like
Yeah.
um he's describing the Ouroboros.
Yep.
And really the only way to do anything with that is to accept it. Like
Mm-hmm.
accept it, be aware of it, be critical of it. Um, and
Make
and then
changes as needed. Yep.
yeah, do what you can.
And I think that's
Um,
what we're doing, like based on like this like cohort and like us like trying to talk about like technology's not going anywhere. How can we so like instead of me like spending 2 hours today with a VR headset on, like masturbating and like getting further alienated, I can have a conversation with somebody a state over and like touch that, put the phone down and like come to terms with this, stimulate creativity. And it's like that's how they advertise Zoom based on what we're doing. You know what I mean?
right.
But it also has like you pay me so many tokens, I'll show you my stuff. So it's like how are you going to use it to make small changes to it? Like the they like you're saying should have a non-value judgment in a sense, but it's like if part of it seems to be like not helping people or so forth, or like you don't care about it, that's when you try to like make changes or get back.
Yeah, it feels like we are almost like an order removed or multiple orders removed um from I guess like an ethical position on it. And in order
Mm-hmm.
to in order to get there in the first place, like we have to embrace our own failings and our
Mm-hmm.
own like unworthiness. And then and really again, like collectivity um is maybe not the only thing that matters, but nothing else matters without like a collective
Mm-hmm.
understanding and point of view and position. Like without embracing the they, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't even matter in the
Yeah.
first place.
And
So it's not like
oops, sorry.
it's not like we're gonna escape the they. We're just gonna
Mm-hmm.
become like self-aware theys
Mm-hmm.
and then use that to make the they rather than like a destructive maladaptive force, like to make it
Mm-hmm.
actually a cool one that lets us
Yeah.
eventually have cool things.
yeah, like you can use the they to like Dave's talking about like poeticizing your being, or like, okay, it could make me better with my partner, or it could make you just be like, I need to have what these people on social media have, then I'll feel complete. So it just depends on how you're interacting with it, and realize like you're still doing it too. You're part of the algorithm, you're part of the big other, you're part of all of this. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think, like, not to try to defend Heidegger again, but I think that's why like he got so caught up with the Nazi party, because he probably was like, maybe this will be what finally like is the they in control, and then we'll follow like whatever the logos is or whatever, and just like, but it's like, no, you picked the wrong, you put the money on the wrong horse with that one. But I think because
Yeah,
he was in Germany at the time and all that. But
yeah. I think all that it's safe to bracket that out because it's
hmm
easy to kind of draw like a causal,
hmm
oh well, this happened for this reason, this happened for that and I can say like fuck Heidegger,
yeah,
but also not fuck this.
yeah,
And of
and that,
course that's what happened to Heidegger. Like, of
yeah,
course, he was a dandy, he was a
yeah,
fucking aristocratic fucking soy
hmm
boy, like
yep.
whatever, dude. I don't care. Um,
You can separate him, like kind of
yeah.
like the they again. It's like you're taking what is pertinent
Yeah.
and using it. And that's where my problem is. Like there was an article the New York Times did back in like 2000, I'm going to say like 13, 14. And I was like, should we get rid of Heidegger? It was like an op-ed piece. And I'm like, no. And it's like,
Yeah. I mean,
even,
I've seen should we get rid of I saw should we
yeah,
stop reading Freud? I saw, but
yeah. And
no.
it's like, they're, they can still illuminate certain things and you could separate it. It's just don't like turn them into deities.
Yeah.
Like I hate Andrew Tate, but like certain times he'll say one small thing that I'll be like, yeah, men do define themselves by accomplishments. But it's when he takes that and then is like, now
Yeah.
turn women into sex objects is where I'm like, no.
So
So
this is totally,
yeah.
totally left field from our current conversation. But
hmm
my partner is a mitigation specialist. So it's
hmm
like a public advocate for criminals. And
hmm
I've been thinking for the last few weeks, I've been really, really thinking about how to apply time energy,
hmm
um, I guess from a perspective of criminality
hmm
and how to come at the issue almost with like a bootstraps narrative, but
hmm
like an actually informed bootstraps narrative, instead of saying pick yourself up by your bootstraps, if you want to
hmm
use that metaphor, motherfuckers that go to this life of criminality don't even have socks. So before we're
yeah.
talking about bootstraps, we have to get these people socks.
hmm
Um, but like using time energy to kind of create um something that helps address the issues that these criminal people have. And I'm not,
hmm
I'm a criminal. I've been to prison. Like
Yeah.
that's the life I grew up living.
hmm
Um, when when people talk about like, oh, hard work pays off, and you got to bootstraps. From that perspective, you're like, what do you mean hard work pays off? Like it is hard. It's hard. Every day is hard. Like my
Yeah.
life is
No,
hard.
absolutely. Yeah.
And you don't understand what hard work pays off means because you've never actually seen it pay off. And I
hmm
and I'm thinking like,
Just
I
these
think
tropes.
yeah, like I think time energy might actually be a way to make it evident to people that hard work
hmm
can pay off, but it doesn't always pay. And in fact, it most always doesn't pay off, but that doesn't
hmm
mean you stop working hard. Like
It, they
being,
were like, if you clothe people first, like you said, give them socks, then see
yeah.
if they fit themselves up. Like there was a study or something where like a bunch of black kids didn't eat breakfast. So the
Hmm.
school like gave them breakfast because at first they're like, man, they're lazy, they're falling asleep in class. It's like, no, they're fucking hungry. And then they scored way higher on the state testing. So it's like If I didn't
Mind
eat
blowing.
before doing this, I'd be fucking thinking about sandwiches the entire time. So it's like, if you want to do the bootstrap thing, like give them, like you said, the same time energy because it's like they don't have time. And it's like heroin addicts are probably some of the hardest working people there are because drugs are not cheap.
Yes.
Like,
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
so they
Um,
just miss that. And it's like if you've never like really like because you can take the same argument as like and I think that's what like not to like go on the right side, but like the abolish cop argument and they're like go to a downtown city and like see. So it's like we just need everybody to get familiarized with the fact that like if
yeah.
you clothe people and give them food, things will probably get better.
Material conditions, man.
Yeah.
Material conditions above all else. I mean, I
Yeah.
love um thinking and the life of the
Hmm.
mind and all that, but if anything, um, you know, make people aware of material conditions above,
Hmm.
like, first and foremost.
Hmm.
Um, and most people aren't aware of that. Most people don't
Yeah.
even understand that like environment can cause people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do.
Yeah. In sociology, there's like strain theory, which is basically saying that like if you don't have money to like feed yourself, you're gonna find a way to get that money.
Yep.
And if like they're like you don't have the experience or we don't want your kind to work at fucking Vaughn's or ShopRite or whatever, it's like, well, I'm gonna fucking steal it then. Or I'm
Yeah.
gonna do what it takes to like get it. And then
Scarcity
it's like,
bias.
oh, these people are criminal. And it's like, no, it's they
They're
need to
people.
fucking eat.
They're
Yeah.
hungry people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no, I think you and Dave are onto something with that. But the problem is it's like people don't know what like I'm not a socialist, I'm not a capitalist. I like the freedom of some of capitalism, but it's terrible and it's gonna kill all of us. And it's like socialism, like I like having like roads and like other things, and it's like I think people deserve certain things, but it's like they just have this like quick glance into it. Like, let me just see what the first three things my filter bubble tells me about it, and then
Yeah.
Marx is fucking terrible. Fuck communism. Look at China, and but it's like there's people
Yeah.
starving in our streets.
Exactly. Well, and then you have people who have these like absurd positions and these
Mm,
absurd commitments, all because they're committed to like the aesthetics.
mm. Oh
Um,
yeah.
well, and yeah, dude, there's so much that could go on. And ultimately, I think it does come down to time energy, and time energy is
Hmm. Yeah.
That's Dave's baby, and
Yeah. No, he's right though. Like,
I think I think it applies everywhere. I think we need to make
oh
it
yeah.
apply everywhere. I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
the lens that we need to take and kind of requilt everything and be like,
Yeah.
look, um, but yeah, this shit, like
Hmm.
we are all
Hmm.
they. We
And
are
most
theys.
people can't sit back and like take 3 hours like we just did
Yep.
unpacking something like this to look at what's going on because they don't have it. And it's like I had to join the military and like go through like years of addiction and other shit and like mental health shit I'm still working on just to do this. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, the bet paid off, but it's like it may not for everybody. So it's like,
Yeah, it's a price that I would not pay again.
yeah,
I
no,
wouldn't.
definitely not. But it's like I'm going to use it because I have it now.
Yep.
But it's like how many other people are like have the time or the energy or the money to take a class like this or to take and like then it's like there's people who are getting college educations for free and they don't even take it seriously.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah, one thing, like I have relative time energy. I
mm,
have conditions that allow me to do this.
mm,
I feel I enjoy it. I like doing it. There's a
mm.
lot of really cool social shit to it. But also I feel obligated to do this shit.
Oh yeah, you
Like I
are.
believe in this and it's like I have to do this. If not, I
Yeah.
suck.
You wouldn't be here if you didn't, I feel like though, because there's no like you're intrinsically motivated to be here. Like you're not gonna get like you're not doing it so Dave prints you out a diploma that tells you like, hey, look, I understand being in time. I'm so fucking awesome. Now I'm gonna get laid. It's like, no, you're like, hey, I see what the fuck is going on, and I want to like get people because like you've suffered, you've gone without like we've been there, so it's like you want to like help other people because it's like you don't want them to go through that. Like I was homeless, I was like addicted to drugs, I like still struggle. So it's like not everybody else can see what's going on. So if you're in a position where you could help, don't join the Third Reich, but like
Yeah.
try to fucking counter it as best you can. So
Yeah,
I think
man.
like what Dave's doing and what we're doing is like I have to believe it's better than nothing.
Yep.
Because otherwise, like you're just gonna give into despair and be a miserable fuck.
Yep.
So that's just
Yeah.
where I'm at.
And there's already too many miserable fucks in
Oh
the
yeah,
world.
oh yeah, 100%. But yeah, no, I think this
Oh.
helped though.
Yeah. I want to, I was thinking about yesterday or the day before, it really kind of clicked this, the distantioality,
Hmm.
um, and solicitude. Like I think there's an interesting tension there that I'm going to keep thinking about. I was
Hmm.
I was going to try to write about it, but I don't still don't think I see what I
Yeah.
or whatever object is off in the distance. I still don't think I can see the whole thing yet. So I
Hmm.
may or may not write about it, but that's
Sometimes it's
what.
good to just because like the process of writing about it, you might
Yeah.
start to work it out. Or
Yeah.
like you could just be like, because like I have like a perfectionist issue, and that's why I haven't done any yet. But it's like just getting something out there starts the
Yeah.
conversation, you know?
Yep. Well,
So
and that's the Dave's three principles,
yeah,
reading, writing, and talking about it.
yeah, he's right.
Like,
So we're doing two of them. We might as
yeah,
well
go do the
do it.
third, and it
Yeah.
really does. It helps helps you discover the things that are there to be
Hmm.
discovered. So
100%. No, I agree. But yeah.
so I am gonna try to post this today,
Okay.
depending on I should be able to get it posted in the forum today. And
Okay, cool.
then yeah, man, I'm hoping we can do more.
Yeah, I'm down. I have a lot of time on my hands,
Tight,
so I'm
tight.
down to do it. I like the morning just because I know it might run long, so that
Yep.
way, like, we have that free time. So just hit me up and we can
Cool.
try, or we could ask people like what days work. That's not
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Is it Max and
Hmm.
Ahmed are both
Yeah.
in crazy time zones? I guess they're not
Hmm.
crazy time zones. From our perspective,
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
crazy
yeah,
time
yeah.
zones.
But we could do like I'd be willing to like do a late night one for them if it gets them like engaged
Yeah,
like at least once, just so like it's not like they're the only ones sacrificing. Because I'd like to hear what they have to say.
for
Plus, I
sure.
like when I think Max is the Irish one. I like when he reads because I'm like,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
I think the first day he read, I like in
yeah,
my head, I was like doing a little
yeah. I
Irish
was like, this
accent
is
the
cool.
rest of the
Yeah,
day,
I
dude.
was like, this is cool as hell. But yeah, no, I think we could do that. But yeah, man, I think it went good.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
So
Awesome
just
possum, dude.
post it. Have a good rest of your day and
Yuppers, man. You too.
take it easy. It was nice talking to you.
Yep.
And
All right, man.
yeah,
We'll see
have
you.
a good one. Take care.
Peace.